Phone's not on buzz mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. As always, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical, and with me today is Nat from the Collective Action Comics podcast, which we're going to be talking about today. How are you doing, Nat?
Good. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I enjoyed our conversation the last time and realized that I had chosen a topic that I didn't give you as much to say about as I should have. And now we're going to talk about your show, and hopefully I'll be able to give you more to say as a result.
Well, I enjoyed last time. I learned a lot more about Captain America than I expected to.
I love Captain America. I can't help it. It's like the actual Captain America story, if you don't pay any attention to the Ultimates and Mark Miller, who, that's his second season. And once I listen to his second season, I will be having him back for a show about his second season too. Trust me, folks. So anyway, today we're talking about Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, Ronald Reagan, and Justice League International, which makes up the first season of Nat's wonderful podcast.
Thank you.
And I want to start by telling a story about the worst character in Justice League International, which is
I bet I can guess which one it is. Guy
Gardner. Yes, you are absolutely right. Now, what is really important to understand is that if the only thing you have ever read is Justice League International, what you do not know is that Guy Gardner was introduced back in the 70s by Gil Kane and John Broome as this sweet social worker who really was a lot like Clark Kent. I mean, if Clark Kent were a Green Lantern, the original Guy Gardner would be him, only instead of a reporter, he is a social worker, a sweet man who goes out of his way to make people's lives better and save them from the horrors of American society.
That's crazy. That's crazy talk.
Isn't it? Isn't it crazy talk?
You would never understand that was the character's history if you just start post-crisis.
Crisis, Justice League International, anything from the 80s, you would not understand the original origins of the character. So way back then, you find out in a flashback that there were two people who received an invitation to Abin-Sur's death. Hal Jordan, who is the famous Silver Age Green Lantern, and this sweet social worker from New York City named Guy Gardner. Now, because Hal Jordan is right there, he gets there right away. Mm-hmm. Guy Gardner's in New York City. He doesn't get there, so Hal Jordan becomes the Green Lantern. But Guy Gardner, from that point on, is designated the backup. If anything ever happens to Hal Jordan, a ring will appear in front of Guy Gardner. Now, this is all a retcon in this John Broome Gil Kane story from the 70s. It's not obviously from the original Silver Age stuff. It's a Bronze Age drop-in. But that said, Hal Jordan meets Guy Gardner, befriends Guy Gardner, and helps Guy Gardner start training with Kilowog, even though he doesn't have a ring yet. And so there's the backstory. And again, he's a sweet social worker who looks like a blonde Clark Kent, glasses and all. And the glasses and all is important because how he doesn't need glasses anymore is also part of the change of his personality.
Interesting.
And in another great Bronze Age story, just a few years later, he's hit by a bus.
Now, see, that sounds great, but I want it to happen to the worst version.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Is so this is where things start changing, for a variety of reasons. Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams wanted a black character to interact with somewhat right-wing Green Lantern Hal Jordan, and so Guy Gardner was hit by a bus and replaced by educated architect John Stewart, who is extremely famous both to fans of the Green Lantern Corps comic book from the 80s and to fans of the Justice League and Justice League unlimited TV shows from the 90s and early 2000s.
That's how I was introduced to him.
Now, what's funny is that the Jon Stewart Green Lantern is actually more like Hal Jordan than Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart is an architect, not a Marine.
Yeah.
But that said, even though even those changes aside, the basic personality, which is I care about social justice in a militant rather than liberal way, that's true to who the Jon Stewart character in the comics was too. Which was, even if Denny O'Neil is an annoying conservative, I appreciate that he wanted to introduce that point of view. And I understand why he wanted to work Jon Stewart in there, considering the times. But then Steve Englehart woke Gardner up. And this is where I have to apologize on air to Keith Giffen, who I have always blamed for the right-wing Guy Gardner. But I found out researching for this episode that is actually the fault of Steve Englehart and Joe Staton.
That's crazy.
Steve Englehart and Joe Staton were doing the Green Lantern Corps comics in the 1980s. And they were wondering, well, why can Earth only have one Green Lantern? I mean, why can't some of these human Green Lanterns be working with the Corps and others be working on Earth and with the Justice League? And so you saw this sort of revitalization of the Green Lantern myth, where Hal Jordan comes back and headlines the solo Green Lantern book and appears in Justice League, while Jon Stewart is the main primary focus character of the Green Lantern Corps book, as he had been. And Guy Gardner begins appearing as sort of a supporting character and foil for Jon Stewart in Green Lantern Corps, which is the reason that he was remade as a right-wing thug.
Because they had to be able to disagree.
Because he's a foil for the black militant Jon Stewart, who keeps putting him in his place.
Interesting. That is wild. What an evolution.
And Joe Staton actually based the right-wing Jon Stewart, Guy Gardner, both look and personality, and it makes total sense in retrospect. I'm glad I did research for this show. On Ronald Merrick from The Jewel and the Crown.
I'm not familiar.
You're not familiar with? Okay.
No. Elaborate.
Ronald
please.
Merrick is the British public school, but kind of lower class imperial cop in The Jewel and the Crown, who beats and rapes the central character of The Jewel of the Crown early in the first part of the book, and is responsible for the guy who looks like he's going to be the hero of the whole series being in prison for most of the series under a wrongful conviction for inciting riots because this particular cop hated him and had raped him.
Wow. What a pedigree for Guy Gardner.
And they based Guy Gardner on this guy specifically to be a foil for a black militant lead in a Green Lantern Corps comic, and the sort of cranky bad cop antagonist to their good cop leader, who's only useful when really tightly controlled. Which leads us to this whole idea that somehow the brutal Nazi racist is okay if he's on a close enough leash.
I mean, that's very CIA coded.
I mean, I don't believe that was necessarily what Englehart was trying to say, but it's totally CIA coded in that you get the sort of subliminal message about the brutal Nazi being okay if the leash is tight enough.
Yeah. They're our bad guys.
Yeah, Guy Gardner is our bad guy.
Wow.
That's the sort of tone, and that tone is kind of set in Justice League International too. He's our bad guy.
Yeah.
We may not like him, but he's our obnoxious Nazi thug.
It is truly wild that they keep him around, and it's especially wild in the sort of vacuum context of the first 7 issues, where nothing is explained.
Yeah,
At all. Like how Maxwell Lord even came into being, and why he was able to, how he was able to get this team together, and for what purpose. And I mean, I think it's very under thought out, but yeah.
Well, so you know what's funny is that the whole point, I believe, of that Justice League International, and I understand what they're trying to do. This is one of the many things we can blame Alan Moore and deconstruction for.
Mm-hmm.
This is why Alan Moore apologized for the Killing Joke.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that there's this concept for Justice League International, which is, what if instead of being actually superheroes were just like the putzes we know at work?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Andrew Helfer, the editor, praised Mark D. Mateus for having like deep spirituality and a knowledge of the human condition, and applying that to his writing. And then
that's true in all of his writing that isn't connected to this incarnation of the Justice League. That's the wildest thing about it.
Right, but Helfer specifically told him not to use those strengths.
Yes. Well, and that's the whole thing. I mean, for people who are only familiar with Justice League International, I desperately encourage them to read Moonshadow and Kraven's Last Hunt. Because Kraven's Last Hunt is the best Spider-Man story ever told. And it doesn't have any of the tropey Spider-Man villains you're tired of seeing in it anyway.
Mm-hmm. I actually haven't read that one yet. That's on my list.
You really haven't read? Oh, everybody should read Kraven's Last Hunt.
I've never been much of a Spider-Man guy.
If you're only going to read one Spider-Man story, it should be Kraven's Last Hunt. Kraven's Last Hunt will tell you why people should hate Joe Quesada. Kraven's Last Hunt is why Peter Parker and Mary Jane being married is good. Peter Parker and Kraven's Last Hunt is why Peter Parker working at the Daily Bugle is good, and why Peter Parker's work friends are good. Kraven's Last Hunt is why the whole original continuity about Ned Leeds is good before it got messed up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so much about Kraven's Last Hunt that really shows why people should hate Joe Quesada for what he did to Spider-Man in the name of trying to restore some status quo that only existed in his mind, and Ultimate Spider-Man.
Was this when he was editor-in-chief or before?
Well, so this is before he was editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief, I'm trying to remember whether Shooter or DeFalco was editor-in-chief when Kraven's Last Hunt actually hit the market. It was one of the two. It's in that period where I was not aware enough of the business of Marvel Comics other than the little cartoons about creators in Bullpen Bulletin.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really have a huge knowledge of the business of Marvel Comics in those days the same way I do now. And that part is the opaque period where, there's this period that nobody really knows who was in charge, because Shooter had been fired and DeFalco was hired. But Shooter hadn't actually left yet, and DeFalco hadn't actually come in yet. And so people were just sort of going through the motions.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where that era of why is my brain farting now?
Spider-Man?
That's where that era of Spider-Man fits in. And the editor was the great Jim Owlsey / Christopher Priest.
Mm.
The writer, of course, was J.M.D. Mateus. The penciler was the great Mike Zeck, who I'm sorry, you can talk all you want about all the other Spider-Man artists. Mike Zeck is the man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was inked by Jim Salicrup.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it's really like top drawer Spider-Man stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Inking.
I guess I know what I'm doing after we're off this call.
Inking, penciling, J.M.D. Mateus's plotting and scripting. It's all just, it's like the best Spider-Man story ever. And the bad guys are Kraven and Vermin. So you don't even have to worry about a bunch of stupid Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin recycles.
Right. Or the Crime Master.
The Crime Master's kind of fun. The Crime Master's kind of fun. If I had my way, I mean, if they were really going to try to retell some stupid story, the stupid story that they should try to retell is the Kingpin Rose gang war story that centered around the conflict between Jack-o'-lantern and the Ned Leeds Hobgoblin.
Mm-hmm.
That's a story that could be done in like 10 different ways and still be good. And you could bring back Crime Master as one of those characters just to not be using the fucking Kingpin again.
I heard that.
But it's just like, I mean, so it's not even the obscure Spider-Man villains who bother me the most. The Spider-Man villain who bothers me the most is Norman fucking Osborn, but that's a whole other story. But for people who don't know what I'm talking about, there is this belief in the minds of people like Joe Quesada that there was this long period of time where Spider-Man was in high school and Mary Jane didn't exist. And the actual fact is Spider-Man was in high school for exactly 6 issues of story time. And that Mary Jane didn't exist for exactly 1 year of story time and wasn't pictured for another year of story time. But to pretend that there's this long period of time where there was no Mary Jane and Spider-Man was in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having to juggle Betty Brant and what's her name, the blonde girl?
Gwen Stacy.
No, not Gwen Stacy. This is pre-Gwen Stacy. This is the Flash Thompson's girlfriend.
Liz.
Yes. Liz Allen.
Oh, yes. Who later on became Harry Osborn's wife.
Really?
Liz
Allen?
Liz Allen. Elizabeth Allen. Yes, Liz Allen.
So I've been reading.
Liz Osborn, as I always think of her, because again, I'm the 80s, 90s Spider-Man guy. Mike Zeck and Todd McFarlane are the Spider-Man artists I grew up with, and of course, Zeck was so much better than McFarlane as an artist.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of McFarlane.
I'm a fan of McFarlane for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, Todd McFarlane is the perfect example of the hypocrisy of 99% of the people who talk about creator-owned comics. The only person I know of who's actually serious about creator-owned comics is Eric Lee, and he's clearly living in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I don't think creator-owned comics are good and that they shouldn't be the future. But I mean, it's fairly clear from a lot of the changes in the Marvel and DC business model that creator-owned comics are not any longer part of the big comics plans.
Mm-hmm. Plus, you have to remember too, and this is not a condemnation of creator-owned comics. It's simply what's happening at the moment. Is that a huge public push of the creator-owned comics is coming from the insane conservative Comic Gates world.
Sadly true.
And that's because a lot of these people have whipped up their foaming fan base into a financial foundation.
Well, and every right-wing weirdo in comic books pretends to be a libertarian.
Yeah, instead of just your run-of-the-mill Republican.
Well, that's the whole thing, is that libertarian has become a dog whistle for Nazi among Republicans.
Right.
There's a small number of libertarians who have what I would call a true connection to libertarianism, which is that they understand that the origins of their movement are in socialism and communism, and even though they're not comfortable with blatant anti-capitalism, they're also not comfortable with blatant anti-communism.
Mm-hmm.
And that small group of libertarians was actually able to push back against the Nazis in their own party well enough that Chase Oliver, who while not a not a communist, is at least honestly anti-fascist, was the Libertarian Party nominee.
Mm-hmm.
Also honestly anti-pedophile, which is a great change from 2020.
Yeah, it's a low bar, but yeah,
it's a low bar. But the
up.
Libertarians did manage to nominate a candidate for president who was both anti-Nazi and anti-pedophile in 2024.
A banner year for the Libertarians.
And now we're way off the topic because I started talking about Spider-Man instead of Guy Gardner. But anyway, J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen give us, like you said, this sort of ignore your human condition. So it's like they're the putzes at work in this awful workplace comedy. Mm-hmm. And by awful workplace comedy, I mean something like the 80s or 90s, the 80s. Let's say the 80s, something like Taxi or Cheers, but with superheroes.
Yeah, and less heart. I think
yes, much less heart than Taxi or Cheers.
Cheers is one of the smartest shows I think ever made. I think it's honestly way smarter than Frasier, and I love Frasier to an extent.
Well, but let's remember that the creators of Cheers were part of this 70s vaguely communist liberal Hollywood that really was pushing back against a lot of these right-wing media ideas. Mm-hmm. Whereas, Frasier was largely Kelsey Grammer and wanting to be a TV star, and he's kind of a right-wing putz.
Yeah, well, I read his autobiography.
No, I do love that Frasier introduced John Mahoney to the world.
Yeah.
I can't totally knock it. Because John Mahoney, even though it's a relatively small role, John Mahoney later has a really great role in the wonderfully anti-police state Burn Notice.
Oh, really?
He has a small role as management, who is, for a brief period of time in the history of the show, the leader of the bad guy organization that framed the central character and got him fired from his job adjunct to the CIA. But the thing I like about Burn Notice, and I'm getting off topic again, it's so anti-national security state. It's everything about the show. His friends are all, by the end of the show, his friends are telling him, "You are fucking crazy for wanting to go back to work for the CIA, you dumb fuck." And he's obsessed with doing it anyway.
Maybe I got to watch Burn Notice now.
I mean, that's another. Really the best. I'm not going to say the best part of the show because it's spoilers. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of things in Burn Notice, if you choose to watch it that way, sort of prove that the villain of the final season is actually the good guy and should have won.
Interesting. I like in-depth readings of things like that, so maybe it's
a great. If you like the argument, and I know you do, because we're going to talk about this, even though it's not the topic of the show, at some point later. I know you love the fact that while Superman really isn't about Israel and Palestine, it really lends itself to that reading.
Exactly, and we have to use it. We have to meet people where they're at,
and so much so that and I DM'd you about this, but so much so that a possibly CIA-adjacent magazine that specializes in vaguely left liberal news coverage of the Middle East specifically did a review of Superman, talking about Superman's history as a popular front icon and connection to anti-capitalist revolution, and then equating that and his opposition to the Holocaust with the obvious anti-Zionist messaging of the Superman movie.
Yeah.
To the point where they say that people being massacred and raising the Superman flag, no matter what anyone else might think of it, is going to make 99% of the people watching it think about the Palestinian stuff.
Yeah.
And
and it's good that
that's
happens.
True because of the way it's been released right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can tell that it's good because the Zionists are mad at it.
Yes.
And I mean that without a trace of humor.
No, and which is, that's one of the reasons that I don't like either Justice League International or the Ultimates. the people it's making fun of kind of like it.
Yeah, it's in its possible attempts to denigrate these people, it instead lionizes them.
Yes. It makes them come off as, it makes the sad, pathetic Justice League International, who can't actually deal with genuine supervillains in any constructive way. Fortunately, they never have to, because genuine supervillains almost never appear in their comics.
Right? It is so silly. But the premise sounds great. Like, it sounds
that's
like
also actually the perfect capitalist message for the Reagan era, where you have all these people who were supposedly working, but were really just partying and doing drugs and making lots of money.
Yeah. The Atari story, I believe, is what we call that.
There are a few examples of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's really, and so it does perfectly encapsulate the Reagan era. But the problem is that, like you said, where it comes off as trying to denigrate them, they end up looking cool.
Yeah. And one of the things, like, we talk about, I talk about in the show, but I think is very relevant to what I think you and I are kind of getting at too, is even internal to the book, there's no pushback, right? When there should be, right? When Guy Gardner is just explicating about how Ronnie Reagan should he should be the only one with his finger on the nuclear trigger, right? And nobody pushes back. But in classic good liberal fashion, we see Martian Manhunter and Batman both thinking bad thoughts about Guy Gardner, but never resisting him.
Well, I mean, and you know, that just shows how well Justice League International is aged.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can think of lots of content from the 80s, and lots of content from the 80s hasn't aged well. But in its twisted, perverse way, Justice League International has aged all too well.
Yeah, it's such a good snapshot.
Not even just such a good snapshot. There are so many metaphors for the way things are now.
Yeah.
I mean, because imagine, I mean, you know, workplace comedies are still sort of ubiquitous now. Not quite the way they used to be, but they haven't totally gone away either.
Yeah, I mean, look at the popularity of Severance. I know it's not exactly a comedy, but it speaks to something primal in the 9-to-5 white collar crowd.
And you know, it's like 90% of your cop comedies or your political shows are still just coming from a workplace sitcom route.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, what was The West Wing but a workplace?
I was going to say The West Wing. Yeah, I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Drama for the sort of masturbatory amusement of politicians.
Right. Wow.
So you can, so in a sort of way, the workplace sitcom will always be with us. And so, and that way, Justice League International will always be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
And Trump is Reagan on steroids without pretense or buffers.
Yeah, which is crazy because they almost say, like, there's such a parallel between Reagan and Trump, but Reagan, there's less of a parallel between Bush and Trump as there is between Reagan and Trump. And
Bush was the anti-Reagan and therefore the anti-Trump.
Oh, Guy, welcome to the resistance. No, but when, Reagan,
no, I don't mean it that way. I mean from a
I know I was making fun of those kinds of people. I was making fun of those kinds of people. Like when Dick Cheney tweeted something anti-Trump and somebody, I think it was one of the Krasenstein brothers or something like that, said, "Welcome to the resistance, Mr. Cheney."
Well, but that's the whole thing. I mean, that you have just encapsulated the Kamala Harris campaign too, and the whole complaint about liberals thinking it but not saying it, where Kamala Harris decides that the best possible thing she could do to defeat Donald Trump is to reach out to Dick Cheney Republicans.
Yeah, and everybody who's reasonable was finally saying, "Oh, wait a minute, I thought those people were bad."
Yeah, it's like, I mean, we hate Dick Cheney Republicans. Why are Dick Cheney Republicans endorsing Kamala Harris?
Yeah, they really they go out on limbs that bend and bend and bend, and I think they're finally beginning to break and splinter. They really truly believed that they could do whatever they wanted, and then we would just lock.
Well, they really had this fantasy they really had this fantasy that the majority of Americans, despite everything, somehow agreed with Joe Biden about Israel.
Yeah. Despite everybody saying, no, we don't, very loudly.
They had this really strong fantasy that being in any way soft on Israel would lose them votes. And this fantasy became more important than reality.
Right. And of course, that intertwines with the fact that being soft on Israel would lose them donor funds.
Yes, it would absolutely lose them donor funds. But I mean, I've got a radical idea. Instead of just claiming you want to collect individual small donor money so you can launder your big donor money, actually drop the big donor money and be honest with your small donors.
Yeah.
But that's too radical for the Democratic Party. They would much rather continue to try to collect our money to launder Reid Hoffman's money.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. But what I was going to say about Reagan versus Trump and stuff like that is that the messaging is the same, even when it's dressed differently.
Yes.
The very famous thing, I forget, it's Alex. He was interviewing Alex somebody at like the Washington Post, where he or somebody was interviewing his Secretary of State. I can't remember, but they were talking about, this is post-church committee, right?
Yeah.
And this guy was saying, well, what Reagan did was just move it out he moved it onto the front page. He said, this is what we're going to do. And that's when he started talking about like bringing freedom to these other countries and working with the Mujahideen and stuff like that. And it became explicit instead of cloak and dagger, right? Which I think was a brilliant move. Unfortunately, it was unfortunately brilliant. But then you've got Trump over here doing almost the exact same thing, but with fewer pretty words. And
Ronald Reagan is the guy who, when he saw a civil war in Nicaragua, decided to support the side that had murdered an American news anchor when they were in power.
Yeah. And he decided not to support the group whose day one action was to start building free schools for deaf children.
My favorite fact is that the only movie about the Iran-Contra mess and the whole Nicaragua thing, the only movie that's actually about Nicaragua, stars Nick Nolte and Gene Hackman and is essentially pro-Contra.
Yeah.
Let me look it up real quick, actually.
I was reading a great book while you're looking that up called Yankee Sandinistas, about American volunteers that went and helped with the Sandinista revolution. And it's really, really good. And they talk about, and I think Parenti brings this up too, where the Sandinistas had to learn a real hard fact real soon, which is that like you need to defend your revolution.
Yes.
Because people will just come and try to stop you because you just took a lot of money out of the hands of some really bad people.
Yes. And the ultimate triumph. And I will always say that, this is the time, that one moment where imperialism went off the rails. The triumph of the Sandinistas, however much the Reagan people might like to take credit for quote unquote returning democracy to Nicaragua, is the triumph of the Sandinistas is that they themselves managed a successful election in which their legal successor maintained their existence as a legal party and part of the Nicaraguan political system, which is to say, the Contras did not win the Nicaraguan Civil War. The Sandinistas successfully transitioned Nicaragua back to democracy from dictatorship. And then they came back into power because when right-wingers were elected by those democratic forces, they totally failed the people of Nicaragua, and the Sandinistas were returned to power by the voters.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much the same story in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez. I think somebody put it up. They said, oh yeah, he's got he's consistently around 89 to 91% approval rating. And like, those are Tom Hanks numbers.
Yeah. To be fair, the Sandinistas and I'll take it back because there are distinct eras. There is a distinct era where, if more recently, the left, the criticism of the Chavistas from the left has become less credible. But in the past, the criticism of the Sandinistas from their own alleged left was much less credible than the criticism of the Chavistas from Venezuelan communists.
As far as I understand, this might be what you're alluding to. I know there was like an ultra left, a more vocal ultra left tendency in Nicaragua, and I think that was spawned from the fact that the Sandinistas themselves were less radical in terms of being like explicit communists.
Well, the Sandinistas, and this is always what happens in Latin America, by the way. The Sandinistas were relatively milquetoast liberals who wanted to bring European-style social democracy to Latin America and were forced to become radical revolutionaries because they realized they couldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because look at what happened in Chile, right?
Yeah.
You know, he was democratically elected Marxist and then overthrown immediately.
Well, it wasn't, and again, and I can't state this enough, people. Yes, there were advisors to Allende who were Marxist. He listened to Marxists in his decision to nationalize certain economic sectors. But once again, Allende, like Arbenz in Guatemala, was a liberal nationalist trying to bring European-style social democracy to Latin America and learning the hard way that this is not allowed.
Yeah. I mean, this is a different mechanism, but
even Castro.
I was gonna say, even Castro was not a Marxist at first. I mean, he became a diehard Marxist.
Was pushed into the arms of the Marxists because he was rejected by Eisenhower.
Yeah, but even then, what's interesting about the Castro story was that the Communist Party of Cuba was not part of the revolution initially.
No,
I mean, they saw good things, and they deliberated and decided to support him eventually. But
my favorite fact about the Russian Revolution is the group that was most central to the overthrow of the Tsar is the now forgotten Revolutionary Socialist Party. But the Revolutionary Socialist Party were the people who were actually involved in military resistance. So when you talk about guerrilla warfare, terrorism, assassinations, most of that was revolutionary socialists and not Bolsheviks.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, the reason you didn't know that is because after the October Revolution, when the Bolsheviks took over, the revolutionary socialists totally discredited themselves by fighting for liberal democracy and ended up de facto fighting for the Tsar.
Ah, I see.
But they were the people most behind the February Revolution, and Kerensky was a revolutionary socialist.
Gotcha.
And they were very much, and the reason that they were committed to the liberal capitalist democracy was because they were following the classical Marxist liberal capitalist democracy as our next step. Now we build a social democratic party.
Right.
And of course, the Bolsheviks wanted to skip past that and did.
yeah.
And we can argue about that all we want. What I would agree with any Bolshevik on is when they preferred to fight for the Tsar than against the Tsar, they discredited themselves and lost any revolutionary credit they had before that point. They became counter-revolutionary when they lost power, sadly.
Yeah. It's no good.
And they compromised too much with counter-revolutionaries while in power, which is, of course, the nature of liberal democracy in most places.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And that's the beginning of the backslide.
Which brings us back to, of course, the 80s and Reagan and Justice.
The beginning of global counter-revolution, really.
Because, I mean, if the authority had existed in the 80s, not to oversell the authority. I'm actually mad that the Authority movie is part of DC's first wave for this new gunverse. But that aside, if the authority had existed in the 80s, they would have been in Nicaragua fighting for the Sandinistas.
Interesting.
And Justice League International I don't think they even mention the Nicaragua thing or Iran-Contra even once.
Not in Not in the first 7 issues, at least. I mean,
And this is like the classic comic book of the 1980s, and it doesn't even deal with in any way the biggest news story of the time, which in any other comic book would have somehow influenced something with international in the title.
Right. Of course, the international doesn't come along until the final issue of the season.
True.
Which is the double.
It was Justice League America, I think.
It was just Justice League.
That's right, just Justice.
And then it became Justice League America, Justice League Europe, and Justice League International. Which is fine, whatever. Of course, at the same time, we've got amazing books like Animal Man coming out, which is very
the Grant Morrison Animal Man, yes.
Yeah.
And let me say, even though they didn't actually ever pay the proper homage to the forgotten heroes that they should have in Legends of Tomorrow, because let's face it, the Legends of Tomorrow were Rip Hunter and the Forgotten Heroes. I did like that they put Vixen in the second season as an homage to Animal Man.
That's awesome. I really like Legends of Tomorrow, to be honest.
It's great. It's a
great show.
But the two central figures of the great forgotten heroes were Animal Man and Dolphin, who were considered the two most worthless heroes in DC continuity for years after that, until some of the wonderful things and not so wonderful things that people did with Animal Man since.
And I think Dolphin sort of got didn't she?
There was a new Forgotten Heroes book that centered around a character called Resurrection Man, who Dolphin and Animal Man mistook for a reincarnation of their old buddy Immortal Man.
Easy mistake to make.
And that's actually a great sort of indirect fourth wall Grant Morrison reference, in that they think the new guy is they mistake the new guy for their old buddy the same way a fan might. But at the same time, it's not fourth wall, because, sure, we've actually reached the point in the DC universe where there are so many heroes that you could mistake them for each other. And it's good we're finally acknowledging that.
Yeah.
But so I always liked Vixen on Legends of Tomorrow, because, Animal Man was so important to the Forgotten Heroes, and they never did have a Dolphin.
Yeah. But this brings us back to one of the funniest, most baffling parts of the very first issue of the new Justice League, which is, then of course this is just post-crisis, whatever that means, right? Because it was such a mess in its implementation, and I think it was not intended to be staggered in the way that it was. It just worked out that way. But when they're when John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, looks wistfully at the wall of paintings and says, "Remember what we've lost," and it zooms in on a painting of Vixen, but she's not dead. It's so silly.
Why not one of the characters who actually died?
Right.
Well, I guess they were trying to. The Arrowverse hadn't happened yet, so Vibe hadn't been rehabilitated, so they just didn't want to put the picture of Vibe up there. And Vixen was from the same era.
I was proud of my line in that episode where I talked about Vibe. I said his powers are shaking really hard and dying a lot. Poor Vibe.
I mean, for all the criticism it gets, the Detroit era Justice League looks really, really good in comparison.
I was going to bring that up. It's actually a really fun read.
Aquaman's whole rationale for firing his teammates is just the best ever. I'm sorry. We need superheroes who are willing to just protect the world from aliens full time and not run off and do their own thing.
We're professionals.
No, I mean, he's absolutely right in that sense, because if you can't get the actual Justice League together because they're all too busy in their own books.
Yeah.
And that's a great sort of fourth wall breaker too, in a way that we didn't really think of it at the time.
Yeah, and that is a great point to bring up, because while that's really fun and funny to think about and very realistic, it also does wander into the territory that Grant Morrison talked about in Super
Yes.
Gods, where children understand comics better because they realize they're not real.
Yes.
Yeah, because the time, who cares about the time frame, right? Batman can be doing multiple things at once.
Yeah. Though, you know, that actually, but that also, that whole Detroit Justice League and the idea that we need full-time people to protect the world from aliens, and because that's important, and that sort of association with the governments of the world and not wanting to sort of break neutrality, that then cycles into the new Justice League book in the 80s. These Justice League books that we knock set up the really brilliant Outsiders book,
which I haven't read yet.
Okay, so there are two warnings for you. Warning number one
okay,
is that Barr and Diodato give some of the worst names to villains ever.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we're literally talking about villains called things like the Nuclear Family.
I mean, I think that's kind of funny.
Well, no, if you like Golden Age comics and some of the silliness from Golden Age, but with a more serious Silver Age, Bronze Agey tone, you will love Barr and Deodato's Outsiders. This is where Maxie Zeus and the New Olympians come from.
Okay, all right.
This is where the Force of July that gets casually killed off in the Janus Directive originally comes from. This is where the wonderful Baron Bedlam
yes.
I love that name. This is where the wonderful sort of reverse engineered from the beginning Batman and Robin duo of Katana and Halo comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody likes the depictions of Katana in the Arrowverse Arrow series, then you know they like Outsiders. If anybody likes some of the stuff in Black Lightning in Arrowverse, they like Outsiders. A lot of that Black Lightning stuff is straight from the Markovia storyline that starts Outsiders off.
Is that the Geostorm or Geoforce guy?
Geoforce. So the storyline that starts Outsiders is Batman is trying to get the Justice League to go to Markovia.
I have read this. I have read
to settle a civil war. And the Justice League won't go because they've got this whole UN neutrality thing going on now.
Mm-hmm.
And so Batman has to sort of go by himself and misdirect a bunch of other heroes who are going there for their own reasons into teaming up with him and stopping the bad guys.
That is an onion to be peeled away.
And the central heroes of the original Outsiders are Batman, who appears as the leader later on, but who originally is sort of manipulating the others from behind the scenes, which is a wonderful idea. I love the idea of Outsiders with Batgirl manipulating them all from a computer,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to Batman actually being with them. That's a whole nother thing, though. But But that does this wonderful story, and Black Lightning, Geoforce, Katana, Halo, Metamorpho.
I do love this Metamorpho.
Batman himself. And you know, Metamorpho, of course, has made his comeback in the recent Superman movie.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I brought this up on the Left of the Projector podcast. I don't normally mind when things in movies are different from how they are in comics. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine with me. It's a different application. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they're good, right? It's fine. The only thing, like, I don't care that Crypto is curly, right? I don't give a shit. But like, I was dissatisfied with Metamorpho in the movie because he was different from the comics, and it's not because he was different from the comics. It's because I like him in the comics. Well, so the 70s like backup action comics bits, you know.
Well, but does he groove? Here's my big question, because I haven't seen Superman, even though I'm very interested in a lot of the themes.
He's just a sad sack in it.
And I'm not anti-spoiler, so I don't mind if someone ruins things for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Sad Sack is good. Metamorpho should be Sad Sack. That's an important part of his character.
See, I disagree. I like well, or rather, I think that it should be maybe the real Metamorpho, but the most Metamorpho we get is him being manically upbeat, like in the Action Comics backups from the 70s.
So here's my next question, and that is the core anti-corporate Stag Industries is evil hook still there for Metamorpho? Because
we don't learn anything about Metamorpho.
That's fair. But I'm going to assume that it's I'm going to assume that if they ever appear again, Simon Stagg will be bad simply because they get it seems like they got Lex Luthor right.
I hope so. I mean, I don't have any hope for Maxwell Lord in this new.
There's so many different versions of Maxwell Lord that I don't even know what I would call the right version. I mean, what is the right version of Maxwell Lord? The guy who shot Ted Cord? The guy from Justice League and Justice League International?
Yeah.
The guy from Supergirl? I don't even understand who the real Max Lord is.
Well, and the same could be said for Superman. Who's the real Superman? You know?
Superman, it's much easier to see, because if we ever really wonder who the real Superman is, for all its faults, we've got the great John Byrne comics from the 80s where Superman is Superman and Lex Luthor is a billionaire. We've got the great Jerry Siegel comics where Superman is tearing down the slums and punching Hitler in the face. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I got to give credit to New Lines. They mentioned the drop-in that Siegel and Schuster did with DC's permission for Time magazine, where Superman ends World War II.
Yeah. God, I wonder what that issue would go for these days.
That 2-sheet drop-in? That's a really good question.
Yeah. There were some, I know we're getting off topic here, but I've been
that's looking, Superman to me. I mean, Superman is the guy who is a classical enough Marxist that he takes both Hitler and Stalin to the League of Nations to stand trial.
Very Luxembourgian of him.
Yes.
But it's a lot of people who don't have any sort of understanding of, and I don't mean that in like a negative way. These are just people who have not put in the time that you and I have, right? They will tell you that it's complicated to think of Superman dropping into an international setting and like who should he work for, who should he fight for, who should he defend? And I say, well, there is an actual easy answer, and it's the working class. It's how he started
in his history. I mean, all through his history. So talking about Superman, this is a good topic for the second hour or whatever.
Was barely touching the Justice League.
Superman was, of course, in the original Silver Age, Superman was one of the founding members of Justice League. In the post-crisis universe, Superman is replaced by John Jones. The Superman who helped found the Justice League is the Superman of the Silver Age, who was a little truth, justice in the American way, but not quite as bad as the 50s Superman. Mm-hmm. He wasn't quite misogynistically torturing Lois Lane as badly as he used to.
No, that was happening in her own book.
Yes.
Jesus.
And Clark Kent is like the classic socialist muckraking reporter. I mean, people who haven't read The Jungle don't understand that Clark Kent is Upton Sinclair.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point.
And Clark Kent is Upton Sinclair if he worked for a big newspaper. And Superman is Upton Sinclair if he had powers.
Oh, what a different world that would be.
I mean, hey, Upton Sinclair did have enough superpowers that during the 1930s, he was able to win the nomination of the Democratic Party for governor of California.
Yeah,
as a popular front communist.
Yeah, most successful communist electoral campaign ever.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Yeah. That's so crazy. But yeah, and that does bring us to what I alluded to earlier is that this Justice League and Justice League International sort of is a product of and a herald to the real seeds of the global counter-revolution, right? I mean, we're 7 years into it now, or 6 years into it after Reagan's 81 inauguration.
Yes.
But of course, Reagan, for all the devastation that he wrought, was still facing an uphill battle in terms of the conservative project. But he paved the way to make it so that even liberals like Clinton would have an easier time to further destroy the state and the administrative apparatus.
And the Superman movie, in a way, for all its faults, is sort of a reaction against the global counter-revolution by people who are just, kind of tired of it.
Yeah, at least the response to it, for sure.
Even the movie itself. Now, and I'll tell you why. There is a genre owing itself to a book called The Prisoner of Zenda.
I have
known as the Ruritanian romance. The Ruritanian romance is tremendously important to DC Comics because countries like Markovia and Karak,
Boravia,
Bialya, these countries are Ruritanias. And their stories, the stories told there, are often Ruritanian romances. The whole Outsiders story arcs around Markovia in the original book are Ruritanian romances about the Cold War.
Interesting.
And about how this Nazi, Baron Bedlam, jumps back and forth between being pro-Nazi and pro-Soviet and pro-US during the Cold War. And how the neutral complications of the Cold War prevent the Justice League from interfering in this war. And that's why the Outsiders are necessary.
Right. And did the Outsiders come out after Justice League International or before?
So here's where it's complicated. The Outsiders are a product of the Detroit Justice League era, Justice League of America.
Right.
We're affiliated with the American government and we protect the world from aliens. Obviously, there are some other stories in the Detroit Justice League than just that.
Yeah, like when they get evicted by their landlord.
Yes, which is kind of cool, but
it's funny.
The basic premise of the Detroit Justice League is supposed to be, we're the professionals. We defend the world from aliens full time and do whatever has to be done in the course of being professionals. And so that version of the Justice League is when the Outsiders started. And they're the ones who can't go to Markovia because they're affiliated with the U.S. government, and that would violate U.S. neutrality in the Civil War and potentially involve an international incident with the USSR and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Which probably really means that the CIA is secretly supporting Baron Bedlam.
Yeah. Or like Batman got sheep dipped or something and left the Justice League.
Yeah, something like that. And that's possible if you want to read it that way. Batman got sheep dipped.
That's very silly.
Which is hilarious when you look at the Batman spying on Amanda Waller of the post-crisis Suicide Squad era. And then you think of Outsiders where Batman possibly getting sheep dipped.
That's very reminiscent of
but the point about Superman, with its story about a fictional European country and its fictional brown-skinned sort of Central South European neighbor, is really straight out of the Ruritanian romance genre, where you deal with some sort of real issue by fictionalizing it.
Right.
And it really doesn't matter what that issue is, because you're not actually trying to represent real countries. You're trying to get a concept and represent that concept through fictional countries so that people will be able to associate it with whatever real countries come closest to that issue at that time on their own sort of natural thing, without necessarily any real author input, beyond I'm mapping these concepts onto this fictional country.
Right. Yeah, and I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree that that is exactly what's happening. And that's
it's
why I
not
get a little
even
yeah.
deliberately any real place.
Yeah.
It's this idea of a country backed by U.S. money and power doing something it shouldn't do to some country without U.S. protection.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to specify it in any other way because it's fictional. The reason it's fictionalized is to avoid that sort of specification. So instead, I'm just describing the author intent and the obvious new criticism response.
Right.
The author intent is we're using this generic stock situation from Ruritanian romance to note that countries supported by the U.S. do bad things with the support of U.S. billionaires, and the U.S. government is not effective at stopping them. True. Absolutely true.
Sure. The
non-specific
part is the effective part, I think, implies that the U.S. government wants to stop them, when obviously in the real life it does not.
I don't know whether I haven't seen the movie, so I can't say whether it does or not.
Yeah.
I would say that regardless of what the U.S. government wants, the fact that what Lex Luthor wants is more important than what the government wants says important things about the dictatorship of capital.
For sure. But of course, that's still.
I'm in the new criticism mode now, by the way.
For sure. And we're not here to talk about the Superman movie. We're here to talk about Justice League.
But I'm talking in this case specifically about the part that is sort of the vague acknowledgement of the global counter-revolution, which is that the close reading of Justice League immediately brings up all these anti-imperial and anti-Zionist thoughts in a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's our new criticism. And the new criticism in this case actually feeds in, and I'm not trying to give the James Gunn folks too much credit.
Right.
Well, I will say that in the New Lines article, James Gunn is quoted as saying he is kind of trying to go back to the Siegel and Schuster pro-working class Superman.
Interesting. I'll have to see.
I don't want to undersell that part because for all its faults, New Lines is the sort of place that would be really careful about correctly quoting James Gunn.
Right, yeah. I don't want to get into it because we're here for the Justice League.
Yes.
So I'm struggling to understand or struggling to think of how the Superman movie would.
It doesn't, except that Metamorpho never refused to join the real Justice League.
Yeah.
And the fact, of course, that the actress who played Hawkgirl in Superman gave a much-deserved call-out to Maria Canals-Barrera for teaching her how to play the character. Even though it's technically Kendra Saunders, it's wonderful to know that the actress was thinking, I'm playing Shira Thal.
Yeah, she grew up with that. She grew up with that one, yeah. I think that's wonderful.
I do, because Maria Canals-Barrera is like the best Hawkgirl ever.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw that, just to go back to 80s comics again, sort of closer to the topic, I saw Justice League, I saw Hawkgirl, and I'm like, damn, this is Hawkwoman from John Ostrander's Hawkworld. I love it.
And her helmet's great in the movie.
Her helmet's great. Her mace is great. When they finally take the helmet off, she's gorgeous.
Yeah, and it's a great reveal for sure.
Everything about the romance with Green Lantern, the way that they finally tie the Thanagarian Shira in with the Golden Age Hawkman in a beautiful way that, why didn't they think of this shit in the comics instead of all the stupid shit they did instead?
Yeah. Of course, J.M. DeMatteis was relatively a heavy hitter in the writer's room in the cartoons.
Yes. J.M. DeMatteis wrote the one of the Mr. Miracle and Big Barda episode.
He also did the adaptation of For the Man Who Has Everything.
Yes, he did. Which is one of the best adaptations. Shout out to Eric Roberts as Mongol, as one of the great cartoon supervillains of the DCAU.
Yeah, I do think that I wish that it had been more like a double length episode so they could include some of the politics on Krypton that was happening.
Yes.
But I understand why those weren't included, because those would have made for a more boring cartoon.
But who doesn't love Lana Lang's hair, Lois Lane's eyes, and Wonder Woman's physique on Superman's fictional wife?
Just the best of all possible worlds, huh?
It's just because it's so hilarious. She looks like Lana, but she has Lois Lane's eyes, and she's as big as Wonder Woman. It's just, they never actually come out and say anything, but it's drawn perfectly.
Right. I hadn't noticed that. That's very silly to think about. I like it.
Oh, there are there are so many little wonderful things from that show. Like the episode where crazy Vandal Savage in the future just wants Superman to thwart his killing off of the Justice League in the past, so he doesn't have to be all alone anymore.
Yeah, that's a good one. Was that was not their adaptation of the death of Superman, was it?
It was.
Yeah, because that was one where Toyman sent him into the future.
He's fighting Doomsday and gets thrown into the future.
Yeah. Which
and then the Justice League dies because of one of Vandal Savage's plans, because they don't have Superman, they have Lobo instead.
Yeah. Lobo's
I got to admit, the one thing, perhaps the only thing that I'm looking forward to from the Supergirl movie is the cameo of Jason Momoa as Lobo.
Yeah.
Because Jason Momoa as Lobo is so much better than Jason Momoa as Aquaman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think that they were trying to channel maybe the sort of wilder Peter David Aquaman in a way with their first casting of him as that. But
I think so. Which, Peter David, rest in peace. Peter David is one of my favorite comic book writers.
I love his Aquaman
run on the Hulk.
Yeah.
I loved his run on the late and lamented phony post-crisis Supergirl.
That was such a weird comic. It's a very
her evolving into an angel was just so wonderfully psychedelic and so perfectly Vertigo.
Yeah, it's very Vertigo. Absolutely, it's very. It fit right in the pages of Shade the Changing Man.
And when he said, and I just love that he said to them, "Will you let me make this Supergirl a Vertigo comic so I can do whatever I want with it?" And I love that they did it. I mean, I sort of miss those days of DC being like almost a creator-friendly company.
Yeah.
Those days are so gone.
Yeah, instead of being all editorial fiat and mandate.
Well, that was the days when Karen Berger's Vertigo was the engine that made the money.
Yeah,
and that everything, and that Hellblazer and Sandman and 100 Bullets were all making much more buck than any of the DC superhero books.
I really liked the little bit of 100 Bullets that I read. I really enjoyed.
100 Bullets is very interesting, and it's great because it goes back to the obvious fact that the U.S. was founded by a crime family.
Yeah.
That's the whole conspiracy. This is a spoiler, and I'm sorry, but it doesn't ruin anything. Because of the way the story unfolds. Knowing this will not ruin any of the surprises. But the fundamental conspiracy theory behind 100 Bullets is that the U.S. was founded as a place for Europe's worst capitalists to launder their money.
Mm-hmm.
And is that not great?
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly untrue. That's what I keep telling people. I keep telling George Washington became president because he was the third richest man in the country, and he became the third richest man in the country because he killed everyone where Ohio was going to be and then sold all of that land. Also the fact that unlike Thomas Jefferson, who was a really shitty businessman, George Washington was really good at monetizing the value of his land and selling people down the river. Yeah.
as were the Lees. The great wealth of all the famous families of Virginia was built not on their tobacco plantations, but on the money they made selling their surplus slaves down the river, which is, by the way, where that word comes from in the English language.
Yeah, that's where.
Selling their surplus slaves down the river to deep South plantations that were essentially death camps.
Yeah. Oh, brutal stuff.
The average lifespan of a field hand on a Mississippi cotton or turpentine or rice or sugar plantation was 5 years, roughly from the age of 14 to the age of 19.
Jesus. Anyway.
So that was a genocide, yes.
Yeah.
But that's what. So George Washington became the third richest man in America by helping to monetize America's long-running Holocaust.
That's so cool. I'm so glad that we're still witnessing the downstream effects of that right now.
Robert E. Lee was not a good man. He was fighting to defend his right to sell people down the river to maintain his lifestyle. However, he might have moralized about slavery in private with his good friends.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely believe he said all those things.
I believe he said some of those things after the war was over, and he was, as someone else who has been completely discredited once said in the 80s, he's old. He's trying to get into heaven.
Yeah. That's what is it? Who is it's Pascal, right? Pascal's wager.
Well, the person I'm specifically thinking of that is the discredited comedian who you shouldn't ever take a drink from if you're a woman.
Oh yeah. No, I meant like that is an example of the philosopher Pascal's wager.
Yeah.
You say you believe in God on your deathbed.
It's also for a great indie, to reference a great indie comic, Will Eisner's The Contract with God.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read it.
Old Jewish man makes a contract with God that if he keeps his end of the bargain, God will do this and this and this, and he lives up to it. So he demands that God enforce it.
Mm-hmm.
He writes it unilaterally, of course, but he demands that God live up to it too.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that's exactly how we should be thinking of God if we're taking religion seriously.
Right.
God should be listening to our demands.
Yeah. Hey, I'm all for the bottom up democracy.
And it's not but yeah. So back to the 80s.
Back to the Justice League.
Well, religion, all this religion and God shit. Now this is big in the 80s too, and Ronald Reagan was brought into power by the alliance of evangelical Baptists and Nazis willing to bundle donations from evangelical Baptists.
And specifically through the power, they popularized it through the power of mailers.
Yes.
That was a big innovation. So
many of those mailers were sent out by an infrastructure in the state of New York that had been established under in the Eisenhower years with State Department money, called the Anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations. And these guys were all Nazis.
Of course they were.
And they came out of the woodwork in 1976 to write mailers and bundle donations for Ronald Reagan.
What a fucking country.
Funded by Jerry Falwell's Moral Majority.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man. I forget who the guy was who did the mailer, did the mailer innovation. It's got a very unique name and I can't remember. If I heard it, I'd be like, that's the guy. That's the guy who did that. I'd be like, fun fact about that guy, but I can't remember it off the dome right now. Have you ever read what is the guy's name? The guy is an inveterate liberal, but a really good writer. He did The History of the Rise of Conservatism, starting with Barry Goldwater. And then he's got 2 books on Nixon and then Reaganland, which is the 4th one.
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember.
It was very informative for my first season. And you take it with a grain of salt and all that, because like I said, he is a big liberal. So some of the analysis is not quite there.
My favorite fact is that despite being responsible for the conservative movement, Barry Goldwater is the guy whose willingness to be serious about blue slips saved abortion for another, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is the best story ever. This is the reason Barry Goldwater said to Bob Dole, "We're the liberals now." So there was a move by Reagan to try to make a man named William Rehnquist Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. William Rehnquist was from Arizona. Barry Goldwater said to Ronald Reagan, "If you want William Rehnquist to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, you need my blue slip. The only way I am letting you have this Supreme Court justice that you want is if you make this Arizona judge, Sandra Day O'Connor, a Supreme Court justice in his seat."
Interesting.
And Sandra Day O'Connor is the one who voted to save abortion for the rest of her career until she retired.
Wow, I had no idea.
Sandra Day O'Connor was also from Arizona, and they took blue slips seriously in those days. And the one issue that Barry Goldwater was consistent on in his entire career was his support for legal abortion.
Wow.
I'm sorry,
That's
two
crazy.
issues. He was also very pro-gay rights.
I had no idea.
He was very inconsistent, sadly, on black civil rights.
Sure.
He believed in the position that the government had no right to discriminate against any citizen, but that meant that they could not tell private business not to discriminate.
Right.
But at the same time, his belief that the government could not discriminate meant that he was very much against the entire legal church-state agenda of his own successors in the conservative revolution, and spent the 80s fighting a principled libertarian defense of abortion and trying to legalize drugs and end the drug war.
Well, good for him. I did not know that. And that it might, so the guy I'm talking
He went
about
on firing line to convince William F. Buckley Jr. to back decriminalizing all drugs, and it worked. He convinced Buckley.
Wow, I was gonna say how'd that go for him, but
he convinced Buckley. Buckley hosted shows on the topic for years in the 90s before the show went off the air.
Wow.
So he actually convinced William F. Buckley Jr. that ending the drug war would be good, that taxing cocaine and heroin would be much better for Republicans than taxing income or property.
Yeah, I can certainly see how that would appeal to a broad base of the masses. And
it's the Barry Goldwater argument for drug decriminalization that has won the hearts and minds of the legalized marijuana campaign. So, I mean, the person more responsible for legal weed than anyone else is Barry Goldwater.
Barry Goldwater, Mr. Underwear Magnate himself.
He also, I mean, obviously, I don't care so much about liberal imperial desegregation, but he desegregated the Arizona National Guard.
Right.
Which de facto desegregated the Air Force.
Interesting. I had no idea. I really did not know.
Barry Gold. He also personally and deliberately hired a black assistant to forcibly desegregate the Senate mess.
Now that sounds very West Wing, right there.
That's Barry Goldwater.
Interesting.
Barry Goldwater was that kind of. I mean, there's activism in the Capitol for you.
Yeah.
Deliberately hiring a black assistant to desegregate the Senate mess.
Wow.
Whatever you want to say about Barry Goldwater and the conservative revolution, the actual lasting political legacy of Barry Goldwater, the individual, was the only real mitigation of the conservative revolution anyone ever attempted.
That's crazy.
Barry Goldwater did more to protect us from Ronald Reagan than Democrats.
Wow. That's a thinker right there.
This is the world that we live in now. We live in a world where the only person who thought to oppose Ronald Reagan was Barry Goldwater.
Right. And he wasn't even opposing him from the right.
No, Barry Goldwater was doing a principled opposition to Ronald Reagan from his left. As he himself said, we're the liberals now.
Wow. Rick Perlstein, by the way, is the historian I was talking about.
Yes.
Rick Perlstein.
Yes.
Yeah. That's, wow.
Barry Goldwater would have punched, if anything, Batman is Barry Goldwater punching Ronald Reagan in the mouth in that scene where he hits Guy Gardner.
The one punch scene, yeah.
The one punch fight between, that's Barry Goldwater finally having enough of the Reagan Revolution.
That's certainly a deep reading on it. That's crazy. What a strange book. What a meaty book the Justice League International is.
And totally by accident.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's like the most, because it's literally the stupidest thing ever written by people who were just trying not to put thought in it.
Yeah, they're trying to be funny. You know,
I really believe, and I give them credit for this because this is the only way to explain so many of the other books. I really believe that once Giffen and DeMatteis realized that they were making money out of this, is like, we got to milk this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we've done in an age where people are able to make some money from their creations. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm. And then we got,
though I should know, in the best expression of sour grapes, Steve Englehart and Joe Staton said, the worst mistake we ever made was bringing Guy Gardner back. If we had created a new character, we would have gotten royalties.
Yeah. Wow. That's heartbreaking.
I got that from my research again, because remember, I found out about Englehart and Staton for researching this show. So I found that part out for the research for this show. Guy Gardner was revamped by people who regret it, because if they had created a new character, they would have gotten royalties, and they unwittingly helped the boss cheat them.
Yeah. And they created a version of a character who had been a nice social worker, man, into one that is a conservative mouthpiece that often gets
and it's their version
correct.
of the character that has prevailed ever since, and not Clark Kent with a power ring.
Yeah, and that's got to be devastating to somebody like Englehart.
I think it probably is, especially since, I not only did I not make any money out of it, I ruined the legacy of this interesting character that I was interested enough in to revisit.
Yeah, and completely and totally unquantifiably, obviously, but there's also there's too many people who look at Guy Gardner and see no criticisms inherent to, or have no criticisms of him.
When the whole point of Englehart's taking Gardner in that direction was specifically to make him a foil for the black militant leader of the Green Lantern Corps,
which is a great use for somebody like Gardner.
Yes,
it just can get out of hand, and did.
In an outsider's book, where you were going from a more serious point of view, and Batman was really Batman and wasn't going to let people go cowboy right wing,
mm-hmm.
that might have been an interesting chemistry. But Justice League International, no. This also gave us Booster Gold advertising on his costume, of course.
Yeah.
To be honest and fair, Booster Gold was the character most like that before Giffen and DeMatteis got a hold of him. He's the character you can't blame them for anything they did with, because it was all kind of true to his origins.
Right. And he's a Dan Jurgens vehicle, correct?
Well, the original, let me see. Who did create Booster Gold and Superman back in the day?
I feel like it was Jurgens, but I could be wrong.
I feel like you're right, but I want to look it up to be sure.
Yeah. And I think Booster Gold is a very interesting character. I don't hate Booster Gold.
Yes, Dan Jurgens, February 1986. So he was only created a little bit before the launch of Justice League.
Yeah.
In that incarnation.
I know there was, I want to say that there was either something that was a test balloon for a standalone series for him, or the Justice League was a test balloon, and then he just took off and they kept him in there.
Blue Beetle,
Yeah.
Booster Gold's partner in the Justice League, was one of the Charlton characters who got a post-crisis solo series, and then was originally put in the Justice League to promote his solo series. That was the thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, there was absolutely no resemblance between the Blue Beetle in that Justice League comic book and the Blue Beetle in the Blue Beetle solo series. And the Blue Beetle solo series actually failed because of the popularity of the Blue Beetle from Justice League,
Mm-hmm.
which is another one of the things to hold against Giffen and DeMatteis.
One of the many.
Now, this is really their fault, because there was a solo Blue Beetle series in which Ted Cord was maybe a little bit of a Batman ripoff, but still a very serious and effective and well-intentioned superhero.
Right.
So I don't know how somebody thought putting him in that Justice League book would be good for his solo series.
Yeah, and totally recharacterizing him.
Totally recharacterize him, and not just that, but recharacterizing him in a way that would make people maybe kind of not like him enough to want to read his book.
Yeah. Oh, that's really shooting yourself in the foot there.
Is it just, I mean, because really the Blue Beetle became such a problematic character that they thought the best thing they could do was have Max Lord shoot him.
Yeah. Yeah. I still maintain that the best part of Infinite Crisis was, unfortunately, the Bill Willingham stuff, the magic users.
So I read all of the Infinite Crisis books,
Same.
except sadly, and this was the one that interested me the most, so I was sad that I couldn't finish it, except To Reign in Hell, which is sad when the one that interests you the most is the one you don't finish. But
yeah,
the Gail Simone Villains United,
the Secret Six
spin-off with the Secret Six.
Yeah, that's really good.
Shit.
That was really good. I mean, but I still think that the best stuff.
The Bill Willingham spin-off Day of Vengeance was also really good shit. And the Night Pact was a really good concept for a magical superhero team.
Yeah, Shadow Pact.
The Shadow Pact, sorry.
Yeah.
And they really worked well. Detective Chimp was like the perfect leader.
Yeah.
And Enchantress was like the perfect, unreliable Hulk-style powerhouse. And it just really worked.
Yeah, man can write a comic, even though he's an insane crank.
Bill Willingham, of course, wrote the awful in retrospect, brilliant in real time Fables.
Yeah.
Which I hate because it's all a Zionist metaphor, right?
An insane libertarian Zionist metaphor, because it starts off with Snow White, like literally the second page is Snow White telling this like married couple, like, we're not going to support you. We're never going to give you money. And if you can't afford to make yourself look normal, we're going to ship you off to a concentration camp.
Basically, yes.
It's insane. And that's the good guy. That's the good guy saying that.
Yeah.
Jesus. I was thinking about doing Fables for one of my seasons.
Fables is a good thing to do a season on, actually.
Yeah, but it's playing it on easy mode. That's the thing. I would be doing that to take a break.
Yeah, because that's obviously obvious, and you can point out all the right-wingery in the book in pretty real time.
Yeah.
Down to the fact of the sort of liberal leftist character Dorothy being a crazy whack job who kills people.
And don't forget Little Red Riding Hood. No, not Little Red Riding.
Rose Red?
No. Goldilocks.
Goldilocks, yeah.
She has a bestiality fetish, and she is like an ivory tower Marxist / on the ground agitator, which I know is a contradiction, but like Willingham just really shoves everything in there. He
has admitted himself, I believe, that Goldilocks, and how offensive is this when you think about it? But he said that Goldilocks is supposed to be like an Angela.
No,
Davis sort of.
No. Did he say that?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why you get the sort of the combination of ivory tower with activism because of her 2 lives.
Oh my God. That's so funny. That's so funny.
And
Chris, that's so funny.
you've got to remember though that there's an honesty to that caricature, because Angela Davis was a Marcusean intellectual who was sort of cosplaying with the Black Panthers in the first place.
Oh, sure. I mean, we respect our elders, but we doesn't mean we don't criticize them.
And when she entered her liberal phase, she sort of abandoned any connection to her more working class roots.
Yeah, it's a strange arc that Angela Davis took.
But there was always that sort of bourgeois tendency in the first place, because again, she's the protege of Marcuse, not somebody who was the protege of Huey Newton.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, you're absolutely right.
And there are some other things, for all the dishonest criticism of the Frankfurt School we get from right wingers, there should be some honest criticism of the Frankfurt School in the way that they really set the tone for pathologizing conservatives and right wingers in a way that is totally politically unuseful.
I agree completely. And further, if your leftist analysis ends at, and that's why we shouldn't have a revolution.
Yeah.
Totally useless. Totally useless. I mean, there's plenty of wonderful things to bring out of the Frankfurt School and media criticism that comes from that, right? Like frameworks and stuff, like anything Frederick Jameson would say, or like a Horkheimer or something like that. But at the end of the day, I'm more interested in how do we make things better for people?
How do we improve material conditions? How do we ignite revolutionary potential and channel it into an actual revolutionary movement?
Yes, which is why at the end of all of my seasons, I always make it a call to action. It's great to talk about superheroes, it's great to idolize superheroes. You can just go be your own superhero.
Being a socialist agitator, we need to understand the underlying message of superheroes from the new critical point of view, which is get off your butt and organize. Yes. Nobody else is trustworthy.
Yeah. And that's what I say, is being a socialist agitator is the closest thing you're ever going to get to being a superhero.
I mean, Captain America, the best part about Captain America in his entire existence is that whether in the hands of the proper left liberal or in the hands of a libertarian like the late but brilliant Squadron Supreme. Why can't I remember his name right now? Mark. Damn it.
I need to read Squadron Supreme. I've heard it's great.
Kind of anti-Marxist libertarian, but it is great.
Yeah.
No, that's not the one. This is the one. Not Supreme Power. Mark Grunwald. There we go.
Yeah.
Grunwald. Whether in the hands of a competent left liberal like Marc Evanier or a raging libertarian like Mark Grunwald, the one thing that is good about Captain America is he understands the U.S. is an ideal and not a material reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I am on the side of the material reality of the American people and the ideal of the United States against the American ruling class.
Right. Like to turn their own rhetoric against them, basically.
Yes. In the Mark Grunwald run of Captain America fights corporate corruption and the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, unfortunately, he also fights anti-state anarchists.
Mm-hmm.
But those anti-state anarchists are shown to be good people fighting for the right reasons, who ultimately side with Captain America against the real bad guys. The villain introduced by Mark Grunwald, the Flag Smasher, sides with Captain America to help beat the Red Skull at the end of Mark Grunwald's great "The Government Fires Captain America" arc,
Mm-hmm.
in which Steve Rogers is fired as Captain America for not being a government stooge and is replaced by essentially a blonde crew-cut steroid machine who does what he's told,
Right.
until that guy reaches the point where he's not willing to do what he's told anymore. And
sort of a commentary on
everything breaks
exploitation
down.
almost.
What was that?
So it's sort of a commentary on exploitation almost.
It is. I mean, Mark
And
Grunwald's
worker
run on
agency.
Captain America is brilliant. Yeah, there are some downsides to it because, unfortunately, he's a libertarian and not a revolutionary socialist, not even a popular front commie like Jack Kirby and Mark Evanier.
Right.
But he is very realistic about the untrustworthiness of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Sadly, Squadron Supreme ends up being kind of anti-communist in its opposition to benign totalitarianism.
Right. Right.
And in justifying the myth of totalitarianism.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a great way to put it. When I think of libertarians,
but it's worth reading. It's a great story.
I intend to, for sure. When I think of libertarians and stuff like that, like individual, like those without power, those who profess to be libertarians, and I do believe genuinely view themselves as that. My bellwether for whether or not I think these people are serious and have put actual thought into it is their position on the police, right?
Yep.
If somebody's a libertarian and they say they want to end government subsidies for things, or they want to stop government overreach, but they're not about
defund the cops, right? And
yeah. I was like, okay, so what's the logical next step, right?
I mean,
and if they say that they want to defund the cops, then I'm like, okay, you have put thought into this.
The spiel that the dishonest libertarians who run as Republicans and pretend to be Republicans run, like Thomas Massey or Rand Paul or Rand Paul's disgraceful daddy, Ron the racist.
Yeah.
What the lie they tell is that we're against the military and we don't want to fund the military because Americans shouldn't be killing anybody overseas. But then ask them how they feel about the cops.
Yeah. We just want the military to kill Americans.
Exactly. What's libertarian about that, motherfucker?
That's more third world Maoist.
Well, no. When libertarianism means we want the cops to kill more people, there's a specific word for that. Oh, it starts with an N.
Oh, N? Yeah.
Nazism.
Yeah. Okay.
We're so libertarian. We want the cops to come home and kill more people.
Yeah. Yeah. Imperialism turned inward.
Yeah. Francoism actually might be a better way to put it. But,
okay, yeah. Is that more specific to Spain then?
Well, the reason I use it's the perfect example of colonialism turned inward because remember Franco used the army of Algeria, the so-called Spanish Foreign Legion, to reconquer Spain for the nationalists.
He imported soldiers.
No, Franco was the commander of the Spanish Foreign Legion. He was fighting in Algeria. When the history of the Spanish Civil War is the nationalists tried to overthrow the loyalist government. The loyalists totally kicked the nationalists' ass and ran them into Cadiz, where they were holed up the same way that the refugees from Napoleon were holed up. Franco took the army of North Africa to Cadiz, the same way the British Navy took the Spanish army in Denmark back to Cadiz. And then Franco mobilized from Cadiz to win the Spanish Civil War for the Loyalists. So Franco was the literal colonial thug coming home to play.
Gotcha. That's wild. I didn't know that. I don't know enough about the Spanish Civil War, to be honest.
Franco is the ultimate expression of fascism as imperialism turned inward, in that he was actually running the army occupying Spanish Morocco and came back to Spain to conquer Spain for the nationalists.
That's nuts. I had no idea.
I thought, yeah, there's so much good stuff in both the Spanish Civil War and the Portuguese Risorgimento. That's really such important lessons about fascism. Like how the Portuguese Nazis were smart enough to understand allying with the US and the British was the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Despite being Nazis, despite being inspired by Hitler, well, we're nationalists. The best thing for Portugal is to be with the Allies.
Yeah.
Which is just so hilarious. And the Allies were willing to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Western Allies, unlike Stalin, had no anti-fascist convictions of even what Stalin had.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you're an I realize that there are lots of different positions in Marxist society on this, and that's part of the problem. But regardless of whether you are pro or anti-Stalin, the most important thing anyone needs to understand about World War II, even if you're an anarchist, is that what serious anti-fascism there was in World War II was represented almost entirely by Tito in Yugoslavia and Stalin in the USSR.
And all you got to do is count the dead.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, one more exception, because these people don't get enough credit and we erase them continually. The largest underground group in the so-called pro-Western underground, which was still widely consistent of anarchists and communists, was in Germany, not the French, who get all the credit.
Right, of course.
The German underground was bigger than the French underground that gets all the credit, and yet never gets any credit.
Now, did that eventually become, or did splinter to or trickle down into, say, like the Baader-Meinhof group? Or the Red Army
Baader-Meinhof group, the Baader, that's a great question, because I've actually been studying the Baader-Meinhof group and how the history of the Red Army fraction compares to our own times. The Baader-Meinhof group came into being in the worst part of the late 60s, early 70s, during what was called the Grand Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
The Grand Coalition was the ultimate fulfillment of Ernst Thälmann's statement during the original anti-fascist period in Germany that ultimately social democrats were social fascists who would side with the Nazis if given the chance. Which is to say, the Grand Coalition was a coalition between the Christian Democratic Party and the Social Democratic Party, in which an ex-Nazi who ran propaganda for the German Foreign Ministry under
Goebbels?
Not Goebbels, Foreign Ministry.
Oh, the Foreign Ministry. I thought
Ribbentrop. There we go.
I thought you were just
the Ribbentrop. I had to think of the Ribbentrop Pact to remember Ribbentrop's name. A guy who was head of propaganda for Ribbentrop became Chancellor of Germany because of a coalition between the Christian Democratic Party and the Social Democratic Party of Germany.
Interesting.
And in this period, the German federal cops started shooting people. In 1968, they shot a hippie peace protester who wasn't even that left-wing. He was a social democrat in the head, and he died. And then in 1972, of course, that's when the German federal police were responsible for the death of the hostages at Munich with their kill all the terrorists strategy. So this is the period when actual Nazis ran the German federal law enforcement organization, and an actual subordinate of Hitler ran the German government during the Cold War.
Now, Chris, I fail to see how there could be any parallels between then and now.
Yeah, well, you see, I fail to see it too. But, you know, and one of the things is there was a group in Germany, there was a media outlet in Germany called Axel Springer.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar.
This doesn't in any way remind you of now either, I'm sure, who published the worst right-wing trash all the time in the German media, who rehabilitated Nazis, who flirted with breaking Germans' anti-Nazi laws all the time, and who were themselves one of the chief targets of the German Red Army fraction.
Mm-hmm.
The German Red Army fraction was a group of students and one or two professors and journalists who got together and very sensibly realized two things. One, the Nazis are in charge.
Yeah.
Two, these are the Auschwitz generation. You can't reason with them. The fundamental underlying principle of the German Red Army fraction was, our government is run by the people who built Auschwitz. What the fuck are we going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that this has a great deal of relevance now.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking of Florida.
I'm thinking of Florida. I'm thinking of a lot of other places. There is a group in New Jersey that has been protesting to get an ICE jail out of their county since Trump was president the first time.
I think I have a comrade that has been at least adjacent to that.
You probably do. If you have comrades on Twitter, at least one of them lives in New Jersey and has been involved, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hudson County. And to give them credit, the young Democrats of Hudson County have been tremendously active in fighting this ICE jail against the leadership of their own party.
Yeah. Which is very hopeful, right? I mean, it speaks to the fact that there are obviously attempts from the Democrats. I mean, this is the entire point of the Democrats, right? Is to be the revolutionary steam valve, and that they're hooking them while they're young with young Democrats. But it speaks volumes to the fact that there's so much resistance from the younger generations.
Well, I mean, heck, look at the totally sensible Democratic voters in New York City who absolutely refused to countenance Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And who actually nominated the only candidate on the ballot in their primary making sense.
Yeah.
Now, we can talk about the limits of reformism all we want.
Of course.
But it's tremendously important to remember that Karl Marx chewed out the leaders of the French Social Democratic Party for ignoring reformism and its potential.
Don't forget the address to the Young Communist League of London, where he said it would absolutely be a mistake not to run in every single election you can. This is not going to save us, but it's going to get eyes on the prize.
Yes.
This is how we grow the party. This is how we get people involved. Why would you give up the opportunity to get yourself in front of the people the one time every 4 years everyone's paying attention?
Exactly. And this is why I still, even though I am in no way and will never, ever be affiliated with the Democratic Party again, and I'm not really a joiner because I have a hard time affiliating with groups that, and this is my failing as a person, but I have a hard time affiliating with groups that fail to uphold their own ethics. And I tend to leave groups because they continue to include people who don't uphold their own ethics. And that's probably a failing of mine, because I should be trying to make groups better instead of just leaving them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only opportunity. You're certainly not going to make the Democrats better by staying.
Yeah,
with smaller groups, you have much more power.
This is why when it comes to large enough elections, I tend to critically support people like Zoran anyway, despite my lack of faith in the long run in reform, because these are the people who need to be talking to people right now.
Yeah.
Those are the people who need to be highlighted within the Democratic Party, if only to show how the Democratic Party tries to destroy them or compromise them.
Exactly. It's the objective forces of history and we as the subjective force of history have to respond to.
Yes.
And there's no clearer-eyed way to look at it than that.
And I mean, and this is why I think the Avengers is a better model than the Justice League in some ways. Because despite the national security problems of the Disney movies, even the Disney Avengers aren't willing to work for S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
The Disney Avengers walk away from S.H.I.E.L.D. And the central storyline in Captain America Civil War, which ends up deeply undercutting Tony Stark for the rest of the Marvel run, because it makes the same mistake that the Civil War comic book did in even-handedly attempting to portray both sides as equal. It's still obvious that Tony Stark is the villain.
Right.
And that Tony Stark is trying to actively disarm anyone who might stop the U.S. government from doing something bad.
Yeah. I do think, and before I understood all of this stuff and the politics behind it, and I think Mark Millar got this wrong, or got this correct accidentally, right? I think he thought it was just funny and ironic that Captain America would be the one to go underground.
Yes.
But he got it right.
Yes.
That is such a commentary on the corporatization of the American state, of the capitalist state, right? That it is just an arm of the corporation, right?
Yes.
And Iron Man staying on the side of the government is exactly what would happen.
Well, it would be Captain America who goes underground, because Captain America has gone underground before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of his history that you can't deny. So, yes, it makes perfect sense that Mark Millar got that part right.
Yeah.
I do think, and to be fair to Mark Millar, I do believe that Civil War shows that the failings of Ultimates are more about his incompetence as a writer in failing to understand that if satire is too on the nose, it loses its power.
Yeah.
And second, in just failing to understand American history and political context well enough to get the ultimate Captain America right.
Yeah.
Because if your goal was for something more real worldy, then if anything, Captain America should have been a more militant communist. Because Brooklyn,
right, was the seat of the
CPUSA, and the people in Brooklyn who were anti-fascist went in 1939 and 1940 and 1941, when Jack Kirby and Joe Simon were coming up with the concepts, and when the picture of Captain America socking Hitler in the face was actually published, were fucking communists.
Mm-hmm.
It was not some racist guy with a love for the KKK who wanted to punch Hitler in the face in 1941 before the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, we're talking like it's not exactly like it was a brave stand to be anti-Hitler at the time, but it was still like against the current, because New York.
It was a brave stance in the sense that you were disagreeing with the New York Times.
Yeah, there and again, for people who are not from New York, when
the biggest national hero in the United States was Charles Lindbergh, and he wasn't anti-Hitler.
He was not anti-Hitler by any stretch, that's for sure. But like the tabloids in New York, and I mean that in like the actual broadsheets, not like muckraking stuff. They often ran columns written by Goering, written by Goebbels. They would platform these monsters as if they were just regular politicians. So to have
in another Spider-Man reference, the reason J. Jonah Jameson is so unlikable is the Daily Bugle is based on the New York Post.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. That's amazing. I was reading. Have you read Jeremy Dauber's American Comics: A History? I
have not.
It's really good.
Sadly, the main history of American comics from beginning to the 90s that I read was by a guy who seems to think that everything he didn't like in comics was related to pedophilia and gay rape. And then he was busted for pedophilia, so his theories were explained perfectly.
Every accusation is a confession, right?
Gerard Jones is the guy's name.
Oh, yeah.
And his book about comic book creators from the golden age to the 90s was suspicious for being just a little too pro-Wortham. And then he was busted as a pedophile, so it makes perfect sense.
That's so silly. I love that. I mean, I love and hate it. It's just one more notch on the comic book belt, right? The interesting history of comic books. And that's what I talk about too, is like
In the comic book makers, Joe Simon talks about the underpaid comic book guy who went postal and killed his family.
Who was that?
Dave Wood, one of the Wood brothers. Maybe not Dave, maybe Joe. Definitely not Wally.
It's definitely not Wally, yeah.
Wally went up, but one of the Wood brothers went crazy and killed his family. I shouldn't say went crazy because this is alienation and not genuine. Genuine like help with pills, mental illness, but the effects of Marxist alienation. But Dave Wood killed it. I think it was Dave Wood killed his family because he couldn't support himself on what he was making, writing and editing and drawing comic books.
Jeez, I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah, well, no, that's the whole thing is a lot of the stuff in Joe Simon's The Comic Book Makers is I had no idea stuff about the personal lives and fates of people who drew and wrote comic books. The other useful thing about The Comic Makers is his memories of his real-time reaction to first meeting Stanley Lieber as an intern.
Mm-hmm. I think I've heard of this, but elaborate.
This is the boss's wife's nephew who clearly wants to get ahead without working really hard and doesn't really understand or respect what we're doing here.
Yeah. Wow.
Some of that changed, obviously, because no one in the long run became a better ambassador for what they were doing there than Stan Lee.
Yeah.
For all its good or ills. Stan Lee invented his own character in the long run about what they were doing there. But I think that's funny as an origin story.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand or appreciate what we're doing here. He just wants a job because his wife's uncle works here.
Yeah. Yeah, because he wanted to be a novelist.
He did. And I got to say, the virtue of Stan Lee is his flaws, because no other writer ever gave Jack Kirby the freedom that Stan Lee gave them.
Yeah.
Joe Simon was partially always sort of holding Jack Kirby back and admits it himself. And their best work, and he says their best work was on The Fighting American, where he just decided to stop holding Jack Kirby back. Which is when we get villains like the American agent for the Soviets, Rhode Island Red, and her rival and weird third columnist, Hotsky Trotsky.
Yeah, Hotsky Trotsky. That's so funny. That's so funny.
And the Fighting American is just this schmucky caricature of the 1950s sort of vaguely pro-KKK Captain America. And they're just making fun of what Timely is doing Atlas is doing over there in their bad Captain America run.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so hilarious. The original creators of Captain America making fun of Timely's bad 50s KKK Captain America.
Right. Interesting. I got to read that too. Yeah,
it's funny because you posted the cover to Rob Liefeld's Fighting American reboot.
Yeah,
it made me think of the original Fighting American and how it's so anti-Liefeld.
Yeah,
it's not something Liefeld should touch.
No, it sort of speaks to like the Millerification of the characters under the Ultimates, right? Like, well, that's not the point. You missed the point.
Well, but again, Frank Miller missed the point. For all its brilliance, for everything it does right, The Dark Knight Returns fundamentally fails to grasp that Batman is a guy who doesn't want any other kid's parents to get shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is
a sad part of the Millerification of Batman. People forget at the root of the character, this is a kid who doesn't want other kids' parents to get shot. Batman doesn't care about poor people stealing people's wallets unless the parents get shot.
Yeah.
And if you actually read the various retcons of Batman's history. DC went to great lengths to show that the guy who shot Batman's parents was not some poor guy mugging rich people because he didn't have money. There was a conspiracy.
Yeah. But you know who doesn't miss the point, unfortunately, are Giffen and DeMatteis.
No.
It's just the point they make is a very weird one.
And politically regressive in the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it fails to do what good satire is supposed to do, which is politically anathematize what you are satirizing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the jester's privilege, right?
Yeah. If your satire does not successfully anathematize Guy Gardner, then what's the point?
Yeah. Then all you're doing is just platforming him.
I mean, the whole point of the Englehart Stanton idea was to anathematize Guy Gardner. That he was only functional. He was only a functional member of the organization because loyalty to the organization and the collective restrained his individual bad qualities and made them manageable.
Yeah.
It's about how the collective shapes individuals and makes them better. And instead, we get Justice League and its expression of how Guy Gardner is allowed to, and Booster Gold are allowed to corrupt what could have been a good team.
Yeah. And instead of I don't know, uplifting and making the rising tide, affect all ships and all of that.
Instead of uplifting Black Canary and Batman as some sort of political counterpoint to Booster Gold and Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
And we don't even keep Black Canary and Batman very long. We get rid of them.
Yeah. And that's a point that I do, totally sort of almost changing the subject, but one of the points I make in this season is that I loved the Black Canary's new outfit.
Yes.
Really good, really useful. And then of course they immediately listened to all the sweaty, nerdy fans and put her back in.
Total devaluation of her as the annoying feminist that no one likes because she won't shut up.
Yeah.
And think about how that characterization of Black Canary in something lots of teenage boys were reading affected those teenage boys' political understanding of women's rights.
Yeah. It's like a complete halt on any kind of development that might have been happening organically.
And it's like this whole thing where we're just going to find out what annoys teenage boys the least and makes them the least uncomfortable, because we're going to abandon this whole idea of message storytelling in comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it was Morrison who made the point in Super Gods about how the audience got very tired of that version of the Justice League. And so
of course, the niche fan base who kept making it money from beginning to end. That book was not canceled because it was a commercial failure. When that book was finally canceled, it was because editors were tired of looking at it.
Wow.
The reason that they kept bringing Giffen and DeMatteis back to do their own thing under controlled space with their own editor, but kept it out of the Justice League books, was because they realized that ultimately this was toxic to their own superheroes as God's brand.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice that everything about the New 52 that was good, and everything about the period leading up to and after Infinite Crisis before the New 52 that was good, was getting things back to the best parts of the Golden Age without losing the most important revisions of the Silver Age.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things that made Superman a universe unto itself are back, but Lex Luthor is still a disgusting capitalist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We've brought back the Green Lantern Corps and all the trappings, but there's still this sort of carefully written story about the military-industrial complex underneath.
That's the era of comics I'm pretty much least familiar with, is pretty much late 90s to the New 52.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've read Infinite Crisis.
I hated Infinite Crisis as an actual book.
It's really not very good.
And what's more than that, it starts with like the most nihilistic scene ever, with Deathstroke and a squad of villains just absolutely slaughtering the freedom fighters.
I don't even remember that.
And it includes the absolutely misogynistic, sadistic murder of the Phantom Lady, who, of course, is scantily clad in the first place.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And she's always been, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, from her original creation, there was a little bit of cheesecake intended there. And, you know, that's part of comics, too.
Yeah, I mean, she's part of Headlight Comics, right?
Yeah.
Which is, you'd never get away with that now. What a different
But
world.
Also, Phantom Lady was also Sandra Knight, the cousin of the original Starman, who really was this badass super spy chick.
Yeah.
And the costume was just like, you know, that's how we get the boys to read the book. But turning her into the sadomasochistic victim of a gang of superheroes, and then having the childlike and innocent Bizarro do a sick of mice and men, I love you murder of the human bomb.
Yeah.
Was twisted as well. It's just, there's so much wrong with that opening scene.
It's almost like it's Garth Ennis by accident.
Now, you know, I wish you mentioned this like at the 2-hour mark, and it spins off into a show we have to do it on its own about the Preacher TV series and comic book.
Yeah, I read all of the comic book. I read all of
it. Good, because I want to talk to someone about the TV series with someone who read the comic book.
Well,
because the only person I've talked even a little bit about the TV series with didn't read the comic book.
Well, let's do another one after this. I'll reread Preacher and I'll watch the show.
Definitely perfect.
How many seasons did it run?
4, and they're reasonably short.
Okay, good.
They're four series. The longest series is 13 episodes, and most are 10.
I don't know if I'm going to enjoy Preacher as much as I did when I was 20.
So
reading it.
I will be totally honest with you. When I tried to watch Preacher in its first run, I turned it off 3 or 4 episodes into the first season because I said, this just isn't the comic book. And when I watched it the second time, I was like, I'm going to give this a chance. And it's different than the comic book. There are parts of it that I like better and parts of it that I like worse, and things that I can praise and things that I can criticize. There's this absolutely beautiful part at the very end. Again, this is so little to do with the actual story that I don't consider this a spoiler, where Cassidy and Jesse and Tulip's daughter are talking, and Jesse and Tulip's daughter says, Mr. Cassidy, will we ever see you again? And as and before he walks away and bursts into flame under the sun, he says, Jesus, darling, I hope so. And that ending was really so good in its own way. And at the same time, I absolutely hated the way they did Jesse Custer.
Yeah.
Cassidy was perfect. If anything, the only complaint I have about Cassidy is they tone him down a little and justify him too much.
Yeah, he's not a good man. He's
not the complete waste of skin he is in the comic book, in the TV series. The Cassidy Tulip storyline is given a little bit of justification because Jesse's kind of a schmuck to Tulip in a way
that's rough.
And that's the one thing, is that Jesse is morally conflicted in the TV show, and ultimately that's not Jesse Custer.
No.
Jesse Custer is always morally certain. The only thing that changes are the circumstances that lead him to making moral choices. Mm-hmm. His moral choices change if the circumstances that informs him change. but he always makes his moral choices in the basis of the same morality.
The ultimate dialecticist.
Yes. Which is the one thing I like about the Preacher comic book, the unshakable humanist moral dialectic of Jesse Custer.
That's not a sentence I thought I'd hear this morning.
What was that?
That's not a sentence I thought I'd hear this morning.
but that's not there in the Preacher TV series.
Right. And
the lack of that, and the lack of the reverse reflective moral dialectic on Cassidy is a weakness.
Interesting.
Tulip is perfect. Tulip is better in the TV series.
Really?
Than in the... Honestly, it's so much better for Tulip O'Hare to be a black girl than a white girl.
Yeah. I didn't know she was black. I haven't seen anything from the
show. In the comic book, Tulip O'Hare is played by the absolutely wonderful Afro-Irish actor Rose Nega, who played in Loving.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with her work.
Rose Nega plays Tulip O'Hare in the Preacher TV series. Rose Nega plays Tulip O'Hare, despite the fact that she doesn't look like the Tulip O'Hare of the comic books.
Yeah, who gives a shit, right?
Despite the fact that her family background is different than the Tulip O'Hare of the comic books, she plays the Tulip O'Hare of the comic books perfectly from every note, start to finish. She is good. Cassidy is good. I don't like the fact that they justify Cassidy a little and weaken the dialectic.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you going to do? It's a Hollywood show.
Yeah.
Seth Rogen, for all his strengths, is not a dialectic guy.
Was he producing it?
Seth Rogen was the executive producer, and Seth Rogen and one of his friends were the creators and writers. I think they actually stopped being the showrunners after the first season.
Interesting.
But they were the creators.
I had no idea.
Garth Ennis consulted a lot with them and continued to consult with other people over the rest of the show. But that last exchange, that moment where Jesse and Tulip's daughter, who's still being played by Rose Nega, which is so it's perfect, says to Cassidy, because the storyline here, again, this isn't for anything about the actual ending of the plot resolution. It's just a happily ever after. Rose and Jesse and Tulip get married and live happily ever after and have kids and die of old age and are buried together. And Cassidy has never seen them again. He's been running around doing his own thing, being Cassidy.
Mm-hmm.
But they talk about him to their kids all the time. And so it's her asking him about all the stories and saying, well, my dad always said you were the toughest guy he ever met. And my mom always said you always made them laugh. Which are like the two best things that Jesse or Tulip in the comic book ever could have said about Cassidy.
Yeah.
So
it was a lot worse.
And then after this little talk about their parents and how Cassidy never did see him again and how they always wanted to see him again, and you realize that Cassidy was really afraid of Jesse and Tulip not loving him and not wanting to see him.
Yeah.
And that he was depriving himself of this wonderful experience because he was afraid that they wouldn't love him or need him. And he finds out they missed him and we're talking about him all the time.
Yeah. Wow.
And so his decision to burst into flames as he's walking away is, I want to see them again. I want to see my friends.
Yeah.
And it makes me cry. It seriously makes me cry like this.
That's crazy. That's so good.
She looks right at him and she says, Mr. Cassidy, will we ever see you again? And he looks right back at her and he says, Jesus, darling, I hope so. And he walks into the sun and he bursts into fire to be with Jesse and Tulip.
Wow. That's heavy. That's heavy stuff.
That is heavy stuff. It's heavier, and it's heavier even than the sort of casually happy ending of the book.
which I don't even remember, to be honest. It's been 50
Well, read it
years.
again, then. I don't
Yeah.
want to ruin that for you, since
Yeah.
I've already done the TV series.
Yeah.
But that moment, which really doesn't have anything to do with the story except to give you the happy endings of the character, but that moment where he just realizes he can't go on without Jesse and Tulip anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that even though he knows everything he knows about God,
Is bullshit.
because God is not very different from God in the comics. Let's just be honest there. Even though he knows everything he knows about God is bullshit, he also knows heaven and hell are real.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'm going to see them again somewhere, no matter what happens. And so he knows that he wants to see them more than anything else. And you get that feeling without him having to say it is the best part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That is great. That's good. That's good filmmaking right there.
It's just the best. It's just such a wonderful actual epilogue to the story. And it deals with the philosophical questions of religion and humanism central to Preacher, and the questions of friendship and love, and how love and friendship can work together and survive each other.
Mm-hmm.
It works with all of those central ideas from both the comic and the TV series in a perfect way. And so, yeah, having watched for the Preacher TV series, and then having read the stuff he's done after Preacher, my love-hate relationship with Garth Ennis is just such a tightrope. Because having read Preacher, I really hate everything he's ever done with The Authority or Midnighter. Because it's like, yeah, look, I know you're low-key homophobic, but Jesse Custer at least beat up the homophobes.
Yeah.
And we knew that Jesse Custer was the good guy and the homophobes were bad guys. But with this Magnificent Kevin shit, you're not making it clear that the homophobes deserve to get beat up.
Right. Yeah. And there's obviously the implications of Cassidy, doing sexual favors in the alleyway for heroin.
Well, but that's the whole thing, though, is that Cassidy isn't bad because he's gay. Cassidy is bad because he's a leech on his friends who doesn't bring anything positive to the equation. Cassidy's not bad because he's bisexual. He's bad because he mistreats his partners, whether they're men or women. Yeah,
no, absolutely. But there's also like people who will not read it that way.
Yeah, I know. And there are people who will see the degeneracy, the sex and the drug use as the bad things about Cassidy. Even as Jesse and Tulip justify sex and drug use and violence.
Right.
I mean, I don't understand how anybody could read the comic book and get the message that what's bad about Cassidy is his lifestyle choices.
Yeah.
Because at no point at any time are his lifestyle choices that don't hurt other people criticized. Yeah. It's his lifestyle choices that hurt people that are criticized.
Yeah, but never underestimate the average Garth Ennis fan.
That's really the problem. And the other problem is that Garth Ennis started catering to those fans.
Yeah.
And you could see it when his version of the Punisher went from being the most brilliant satire on the police state to being the most obnoxious set of cock jokes.
How the mighty have fallen.
And it's just a few issues down the line. You get the wonderful Mother Russia, where Nick Fury hires the Punisher to be a mole in a secret black ops operation to rescue a little girl who's been infected with a secret bioweapon from Russia, specifically because he knows that the Punisher, number one, will save a child no matter what and not let the government fuck it up. And number two, not let the government get the bioweapon no matter what.
Right.
So Nick Fury is deliberately involving the Punisher to sabotage his own colleagues in the U.S. government.
Interesting. And that's part of the Garth Ennis. Is that Punisher Max?
That's part of Punisher Max. So it's the rattled old senior citizen Nick Fury bitch whipping a 4-star general with his belt because the 4-star general is mad at him that the Punisher fucked up the mission.
Interesting.
And I'm sorry, there's nothing better than the Jack Kirby Stan Lee white guy with an eye patch Nick Fury bitch whipping a general for being a Nazi.
Yeah, I mean, that rocks.
And I mean, for all of Garth Ennis's failing, there's the good Garth Ennis of Preacher and Mother Russia, and the bad Garth Ennis of everything else.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. There's one other good Garth Ennis, and that's Dangerous Habits.
And I haven't
Dangerous
read that
Habits
one.
is brilliant.
I've read The Boys in its entirety, and
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, that's why I don't watch the TV show. I had enough of the abject cruelty, and I don't want to subject myself to that again.
I mean, and that's the thing. The thing, and that's the dangerous part about Garth Ennis, is that Jesse Custer's sadism is carefully circumscribed within his Americanism and his sense of justice. Whereas John Constantine's sadism in the Garth Ennis run after Dangerous Habits is a guy cutting the wings off an angel for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't even end up needing the angel whose wings he cut off. And John Constantine wouldn't do that for no other reason than sadism. Garth Ennis blew the character there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I really think so. I mean, I understand John Constantine isn't supposed to be a good guy, but cutting off the angel's wings out of sadism, and then your plan actually is just to let the devil kill the angel to feel safe. That's not quite John Constantine.
That seems a little unnecessary.
I understand what Ennis was trying to do with it, and he was trying to prove that Constantine wasn't redeemable and his girlfriend shouldn't keep him around. But I really don't think John Constantine is actually that person in any other comic but those Garth Ennis comics.
I've not read a lot of Constantine.
I can't see any other writer having Garth Ennis have John Constantine cut an angel's wings off with a chainsaw out of sadism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this sort of reverse counterpoint of Morpheus in Sandman cutting Lucifer's wings off out of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think about that. John Constantine cutting Gabriel's wings off out of sadism versus Morpheus cutting off Lucifer's wings out of love.
I mean, the word counterpoint is great there, I think. There's a direct contradiction, I think, to both of those, or they contradict themselves in a way that's almost complementary.
Gaiman, of course, is also a problematic creator now because it turned out that a whole lot of his guilty conscience shit about Morpheus was based on his real guilty conscience about how he really treated women.
Yeah, and that's...
I guess it shouldn't be a real surprise. Watching the Sandman TV show on Netflix, there's a lot that comes to mind. There's a lot in it that really reads blatantly and heavy-handedly as someone abusing women trying to be better.
And even the first run of Sandman comics.
Yes.
The muse that's trapped in the basement.
Yes.
That's... I mean, it's really... You read it differently when you realize that it's very parallel with the real world.
But at the same time, it kind of should have been a hint that this is something he's struggling with in the way that he makes it so central to his metafiction.
Right.
It also ties into his association with Miracle Man in interesting ways. Which
I have not read any Miracle Man, Alan Moore's or Gaiman's.
I won't ruin anything for you then if you haven't read it. My favorite thing from Miracle Man is how Miracle Man, the real life story of Miracle Man, is the perfect criticism of corporate and creator-owned comics.
That's
In
what I've
that,
heard.
the original Miracle Man was a creator-owned ripoff of a corporate American comic.
Mm-hmm.
The Miracle Man that became famous was a corporate ripoff of the creator-owned Miracle Man series that it turns out Des Skin of 2000 AD never actually bothered to pay for and was just plagiarizing in the first place.
Oh
So
shit.
there was no actual ownership of what at that time was Marvel Man when Alan Moore was hired to revamp Marvel Man.
Wow. I had no idea.
And then you had this whole ownership dispute between the original creator's estate, the 2000 AD corporate empire, and Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, who had been hired by the 2000 AD corporate empire and believed they owned their work on the book, that ultimately ends up with Miracle Man being owned by Marvel Comics.
And all of this sort of parallels within, or is interesting within the story that happens inside Miracle Man?
No, the reason it's interesting is because Neil Gaiman is central to two of the most interesting creator rights disputes ever. Miracle Man, between the original creators, the 2000 AD people, and the 2000 AD creators, and the dispute over various Spawn characters created while working for hire for Todd McFarlane, in which Todd McFarlane, the hero of creator ownership, wanted to claim proprietary ownership of work for hire characters, but work for hire rebel Neil Gaiman ended up selling the characters he won the ownership of to Marvel.
Wow.
Which is how Angela ended up in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wow. I had no idea.
Neil Gaiman is central to these two deeply important conflicts between creators and corporations, both times as a putatively wronged creator. But after winning his court case, he cashed in on his ownership by selling the rights of the characters he owned to Marvel Comics.
Wow.
The ultimate tragedy of creator-owned comics under capitalism is that creators who own their own comic books become bosses.
Yeah.
And class collaborators who can make more money licensing or selling their properties to companies like Marvel and DC than they can publishing their own creator-owned books.
And that's that's sort of a microcosmic example of exactly what Luxemburg talks about in Reform or Revolution.
Yes.
And she's really just expounding on what Marx said in Capital, obviously, but she puts her own unique and somewhat boringly written spin. But
that's the final irony of the greatest victories for creator rights in the history of comics. Neil Gaiman sold the rights to Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is something else.
And we didn't even get Karen Gillian playing Angela in Guardians of the Galaxy. She played Nebula instead, and we didn't get a hot badass redhead. Just imagine, as a fellow nerd who surely appreciates comics for all the reasons nerds appreciate them, just imagine a Guardians of the Galaxy movie with Karen Gillan as Angela.
I mean, it's the dream, right? That's so
funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that it is like, yes, class collaboration is a very good way to put it, but it's so interesting the way
except for Eric Lee, who is still,
as you said, a man in the past,
holding the line for cooperative syndicalism and creator-owned books, and still believes in it. Jim Lee became a corporate guy at DC, took his entire universe to DC with him.
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane became just another boss, feuding with his own creators and Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee over who owned what. And Neil Gaiman, the creator, fighting for creator rights against both Todd McFarlane and 2000 AD, sells to Marvel.
Yeah, which should be it should have been another indicator.
Eric Lee wrote a really great, and I have mixed feelings about Eric Lee, but whatever else you have to say, his ethic is consistent.
Mm-hmm.
He really believes in anarcho-syndicalist collaboration between comic book creators, and he opposes dealing with corporate comic book entities in any way. And, you know, the behavior of his colleagues appears to justify his ethic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's certainly something to be said for consistency. And it's one of those things, like, I hate it when I'm right, you know?
I hate it when Eric Lee is right, because there are lots of things. Because in service of being right, Eric Lee said we should support the boss, Todd McFarlane, over the disgruntled employee, Neil Gaiman, because ultimately Neil Gaiman is a class collaborator for Marvel Comics.
Mm-hmm.
And people at the time wanted to focus on the fact that Todd McFarlane, the champion of creator rights, was just another bad boss. But both things were true at the same time.
Sure.
Todd McFarlane was just another bad boss, but Neil Gaiman really was ultimately interested in making money off of class collaboration with Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric Lee was right in his criticism at the time, and those of us who rooted for Neil Gaiman were kind of wrong in our sort of in our sort of hot dismissal of it. We're for creator rights.
Yeah. The fact that he turned around so quickly and sold his hard-earned gains, if you will, should have been a big red flag.
Well, I mean, obviously that is a big red flag in the end. But I mean, this is the way I put it, is every celebrity, including myself and anybody who comes on my show, is probably problematic in some way, simply by virtue of being human.
Sure.
How problematic people are varies. And there are definitely lines that should be drawn. But I think sometimes we do go too far. I hate to talk about purity testing, because the wrong people usually talk about purity testing in the wrong way.
Sure.
I think we demand personal purity too much from people in our own circles, like me saying I can't work with people who I don't find
too much from the powerless
ethics of the organization.
Yeah, it's a power scaling thing.
Yeah, and so obviously even I am still conflicted in my own life and activism about where to draw the line.
Right.
And I'm still struggling with that myself as I try to rebuild some sort of community and organize some sort of support system for my show.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we can't be so demanding that people be perfect that we forget people are human, because that's anti-humanist.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, if you're anti-humanist, you end up being anti-human in the end.
Yeah. And there's a very specific political philosophy that aligns closely with being anti-human.
Well, one of the reasons that I became an anarchist in the first place was not because of anything good written about anarchism, but by controversies within anarchism.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid discovering what anarchism was, the biggest thing happening in anarchism was that Murray Bookchin was having these huge fights with other anarchists about what it meant to be a collectivist or an individualist, and what it meant when talking about environmental issues to be humanist or misanthropic.
Mm-hmm.
And what made me become an anarchist was Murray Bookchin upholding collectivism and humanism against individualistic misanthropes.
Mm-hmm.
Not the rich political history of anarchism, but an aggressive, divisive controversy within anarchism that allowed one person to say what anarchism is supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
Collective humanism.
Mm-hmm. But of course, that you just mentioned is part of the history.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
It is. And that's an important part of the history. But it's that controversy, that divisiveness, if you will, that allows someone, a Bookchin, to clarify, but this is what anarchism has always been about and should be about.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, I think there are a lot of people who have listened more to the lifestylers and the deep ecologists than to Bookchin, and that we have a whole lot of problems in the environmental movement and the civil liberties movement because of it.
Right.
And the problem is not anarchists in the way that you will sometimes hear Marxists complain about them, or Marxists the way you will sometimes hear anarchists complain
right.
about them, but the ways in which various political currents, and I'll be honest and say sectarian currents, tend to lead various groups to ally with capital against each other instead of leaguing together against capital.
Right.
One of the things that I really like about the Superman movie, even though I haven't seen it yet, is that a bunch of diverse individuals come together as a collective to do the right thing in support of somebody who really inspires them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, that's a good message no matter what.
It is a good message. I'm not certain it actually happens in the movie, though.
Fair enough.
I think people are writing that it has happened, and I'm wondering what movie they saw.
And that's fair. That's fair.
But I want that. I want that to.
Well, no, I think it's more of a I think they're seeing this as a prefiguration of where the Justice Gang is going, as opposed to where the Justice Gang ended at the movie.
Yeah.
Because it's fairly clear that in the gun version, the Justice League is going to be inspired by something positive like this Justice Gang, as opposed to Batman's paranoid fear of Superman.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the guy who played Mr. Terrific just signed a 6-movie deal, so he's coming back.
Now, I want to give a shout out to Edie Gathegi.
Is that how you say it?
I don't know if that's how you say it or not. That's how I've always read it, seeing it as credited as a guest star on everything from Veronica Mars to The Blacklist.
Right.
Yeah, he is a hard-working actor who's been doing good work on TV content I like since the early 2000s, and who deserves the chance to play a superhero in a big-budget movie.
Hell yeah. I like that read on it, because he does a great job. He's sort of one note in the movie, but he plays that one note very, very well.
I mean, let's be honest, Mr. Terrific is not exactly a deeply fleshed out
yeah. They had even filed a trademark
character in many, many comics.
They had not filed a trademark. Did you see that? They just filed for trademark for Mr. Terrific.
Yeah, because of this movie mostly.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, they had an immense amount of freedom in what they did with their take. The reason they went with Mr. Terrific on Arrow, turns out it was because of that lack of trademark, and they would have less interference in what they did with the character.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So the history of the Arrowverse, which is part of why I think it's a great political metaphor. The history of the Arrowverse is the creators giving DC Comics what still is, even with all its faults, the best commercial property they've ever had in media.
Uh-huh.
And DC Comics repeatedly making it worse and killing it and resenting its success because they were trying to make movies.
Right.
And ultimately killing it and making it go away because they resented that it was better than their movies.
Yeah. That's so funny.
The worst part is you have Legends of Tomorrow finally going back into a great superhero direction by adding Booster Gold to the team and being canceled on a cliffhanger.
Oh, no.
Introducing new antagonists, the Time Police.
Uh-huh.
So now, if we had actually had a Legends of Tomorrow show in 2021, it would have been a George Floyd influenced anti-cop season. With the Time Police holding the Legends in custody at the beginning of the series.
Heartbreaking.
Right? Now you know why the right-wing Discovery Channel killed it after acquiring Warner Brothers.
In 2022, yeah. Wow.
But it's just, we would have, and it was just such a great cliffhanger. Though I did resent them taking John Constantine off the show, but leaving Matt Ryan on it. Because why are you making us look at this guy who looks like John Constantine but isn't a superhero? One of the many examples of ways in which the corporate people messed it up. Yeah. Another thing, and I really would have liked, this is why Sierra Renee and the other guy leaving the show after the first season was such a tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that the technology Vandal Savage was trying to use to have his way at the end of Legends of Tomorrow was Thanagarian?
No, I'd forgotten that.
It was Thanagarian, which means if we had kept Hawkman and Hawkgirl on the show,
mm-hmm.
we could have had Thanagar stories.
Yeah, that'd have been fine. Maybe even get some Adam Strange in there.
But they left, and we never got Thanagar stories.
Yeah.
One of the many little things. And then there was that, they killed off the Suicide Squad and the best version of Deadshot to ever exist in media because they wanted to make a movie that starred Will Smith.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, Suicidal Tendencies is like one of the best episodes of Arrow ever.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, there is nothing more out of character for Deadshot than to actually get the heroic death he wants.
Right.
The whole point of the Deadshot character is he tries to redeem himself by going out heroically and wakes up in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
And when they brought the actor back to play Floyd Lawton in a jail cell while Diggle was in prison, I was really hoping that they really had gotten that aspect of Floyd Lawton right and that he had woke up in a hospital bed somewhere.
Right.
And I was really disappointed when it was in Diggle's mind. Because that was one of the real failures when Floyd Lawton actually gets a heroic death. Because that's so against the point of Deadshot. The whole tragedy of Floyd Lawton is he wakes up in the hospital bed every damn time.
Yeah.
The tragedy of Floyd Lawton is not that he dies, but that he has to go on living. Because Floyd Lawton epitomizes the Suicide Squad. He's somebody who's been trying to commit suicide by cop all his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he resents Batman because Batman didn't kill him.
That's heartbreaking.
That's why John Ostrander is brilliant.
Yeah. I've only read the first couple of issues of his Suicide Squad, but I really liked it.
It doesn't matter what it is, though. It doesn't matter if it's some stupid comic book you're never going to see again.
Mm-hmm.
Anything John Ostrander writes is brilliant.
I did like that they had a reference to him in one of the very early episodes. They talk about there's a corporate Ostrander suite in the Queen building or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they've got all sorts of those little things. The scientist who builds the earthquake machine for Malcolm Merlin in the first season of Arrow is Brian Markov. Geoforce.
Of the Markov chain?
Brian Markov, as in the royal family of Markovia.
Of course. Duh. I was so
Geoforce.
grounded in the real world. I forget what it was, but there was in one of the very first episodes of Gotham, there was an unbelievable deep cut reference to the Shadow.
Yes.
And it was the episode where the guy would kill people by sending them up in balloons or on balloons. And it was some side character, maybe it was even that character in the episode, was named, the first and last name was a compound of the Shadow's initial name, Lamont Cranston, I think it was Lamont somebody, and I can't remember the last name was, but it was another reference to the Shadow, and it's really good. And you never saw the person's face.
So deep cut shadow lore. Deep cut shadow lore.
Yeah.
Lamont Cranston is not the Shadow. Deep cut shadow lore. Lamont Cranston is the Shadow's cover.
Okay.
The Shadow is, let me look this up just a sec. This is one where I remember details but have to look up the specific, the absolute specifics. Kent Allard, that's it. So the Shadow.
It was like Lamont Allard or something like that.
Yeah, the Shadow is a World War I veteran named Kent Allard.
Yes. Who
was a crime lord in the Far East. That part of the movie is accurate.
Yeah.
And who was recruited by an order of Eastern monks. Again, that part of the movie is accurate. To use darkness to fight against evil. Yeah. And by mastering his own darkness as a bad person, he would be able to fight evil.
That's such a great idea.
It really is. And Kent Allard, as part of because he's a World War I veteran, he understands the importance of strategy and tactics and planning and logistics. Kent Allard doesn't just become a lone vigilante. Kent Allard gets organized. Kent Allard recruits a pool of agents. And the first agents he recruits are Lamont Cranston and Clifford Marsland. Lamont Cranston is a rich playboy who spends all his time in another city, but owns a nightclub in New York. And so Lamont Cranston, who looks kind of like Kent Allard, allows Kent Allard to use his identity in New York City while managing the finances of the Shadows network from other cities.
Interesting. And of course,
you never actually see the real Lamont Cranston in any Shadow stories. You only hear about him secondhand and see the Shadow pretend to be Lamont Cranston.
That's so good. That's so fun. What an interesting thing.
The original Shadow is like deep, the whole deep lore for all of comic books. There's so much in the Shadow that prefigures this our wonderful hobby.
Literally millions of pages worth of Shadow stories, right?
Yes, yes. By multiple authors who used the same house pen name. And only the original is really well known.
Yeah.
And it's just but all this there's all this stuff in the Shadow that Bob Kane openly and deliberately plagiarized.
Yeah.
Ra's al Ghul might as well be Shawan Khan. No, that's Denny O'Neil.
Yeah.
All of this great, and of course it was Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams who had Batman meet the Shadow and Sherlock Holmes in that same Ra's al Ghul storyline. But there's so much from the Shadow that's been used for Batman or Spider-Man or whomever.
Yeah. I mean, it's fundamental. It's foundational for sure. And you know, a lot of people don't understand that comics come from the pulps. But that's the thing that I like the most is that the Shadow has an organization that feeds him intelligence. And rather than just reacting to,
oh, a supervillain is doing this. The Shadow is actively trying to find out what's happening in the world to stay on top of it.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of that in the movie too.
The best part of the movie is where they really show that he's sort of like this revolutionary influence within organizations, subverting them to his own to serve the Shadow instead of the government. Like when Shawan Khan ends up institutionalized, but the guy who's responsible for his care is wearing one of the Shadow's rings.
Uh-huh. Man, I gotta watch that movie again. I just watched The Rocketeer again. I watched Rocketeer.
You know, I if you like comic book stuff, the Shadow movie and the Phantom movie deserve a second look.
I hate the Phantom movie. I watched it recently.
Phantom movie?
I used to love it as a kid. I rewatched it as an adult, like literally within the last like 6 months, and I did not enjoy it.
Well, that's fair.
The Rocketeer is the perfect movie.
I don't like admittedly, the purple costume looks horrible in the movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's because the purple color of the costume was accidental creation of the 4-color method,
right?
Which is something else that deserves its own show. How those colors got so weird in the original comics.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it was never intended to be that color purple. It's supposed to be black, but you can't render black in the comics, so it became purple.
That's so funny. I love that, but it's iconic. It became iconic.
It did, but it looks so bad in the movie. There are so many good things about that movie, though, that I like Billy Zane in New York and Treat Williams as Xander Drax, which is
he steals the show for me.
He does a very comic booky.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, I like Patrick McGoohan as the Phantom, as the ghost of the previous Phantom.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing.
And I like Eddie, the character actor, Kerry Hayugasa. That's his name, Kerry Hayugasa. He's also a murder victim in Rising Sun. He plays the leader of the same Brotherhood in the Phantom.
Yeah,
he's just always good. He's one of those scenery chewing actors who's never had a bad role, even though he's been in lots of bad movies.
Yeah, I mean, he was Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was also like some step warlord chief in a really early episode of Stargate SG-1.
Even though he ended up not being him, I'm shocked they didn't end up casting him as Shang-Chi's father too.
Oh yeah, that'd have been fun. I know he played a minister in that Philip K. Dick Nazi story. Man in the High Castle. Yeah, he was a Japanese minister in that who was having
all the great Philip K. Dick stuff. They choose to make Man in the High Castle into a TV show that lasts for seasons and seasons.
Why? Yeah, which is just a short story about the I Ching, right?
Man in the High Castle is, the Man in the High Castle is a novel. And it's about what the TV series is about. The TV series goes into much, much more depth. The Man in the High Castle is an alternate universe story about a world in which the Nazis and the Japanese, the world in which the Axis won World War II.
I watched the first season. I thought it was great.
And the book, the title character, the Man in the High Castle, is an author of science fiction novels in which the Allies won World War II.
Interesting.
And so it's an alternate universe in which the titular character ends up being someone with a window into the real universe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember much else about what it's about because it's not Philip K. Dick's best work. It doesn't say a lot politically in the way that, say, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep does.
Right.
It's definitely no Radio Free Albemuth.
Mm-hmm.
Only Netflix could make that one into a TV series, and I haven't had the guts to watch it yet to see how much they screwed it up.
Right.
My guess is it's corporate libertarian crap, but who knows?
Who knows? I didn't have any plans to watch it.
No, I'm the overpriced Netflix property I shouldn't be giving clicks to that I currently am is for obvious reasons The Sandman.
Yeah.
Which, knowing what I know now in watching it, everything about abusive relationships is like so much Neil Gaiman beating himself up for it literarily without wanting to admit it to his fans.
Yeah. Or curtail his own behavior.
Yeah. And it's like, and which you can sort of see in Morpheus, because Morpheus, for like 9/10 of the Sandman comic book until the very last story run, is refusing to admit his mistakes. All of the action in the Sandman comic books comes from Morpheus admitting things that he did wrong before.
Yeah, that's
and they really did a good job of making the TV of hanging the TV series around the important story points about the things Morpheus did wrong and make it about Morpheus having a guilty conscience.
Right. Yeah, the absolution of the dream.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you can also see how the comic book is Neil Gaiman trying to rehabilitate himself while not wanting to do better in real life, like you said.
Yeah, which is quite disgusting, to be honest.
There's a joke about Neil Gaiman in retrospect in Preacher. In retrospect.
Well, I'll have to get there.
Tulip's friend Amy. So obviously comic book, not movie, since Amy sadly isn't in the TV show. But Tulip's friend Amy says that she had an ex-boyfriend who asked her a bunch of questions about her period, like she was really interested in it, was so sympathetic and empathetic and supportive, but then wrote a bad horror novel about women on their period. And in retrospect, it's like, oh my God, did Garth Ennis know and talk to one of Neil Gaiman's exes?
Jesus, yeah. I mean, maybe they were colleagues.
I know, both at Vertigo.
Wow.
It makes you wonder.
It really makes you think.
And Sandman, at the time Neil Gaiman was writing Preacher, Sandman had just recently ended and was, of course, the book that built Vertigo.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't be able to outright criticize Neil Gaiman in any obvious way, but you could say something subtle like that people would realize years later, potentially.
Yeah. I wonder if old Neil himself was aware of these sorts of criticisms.
I wonder, because now in retrospect, I mean, I have no reason for thinking that actually means Neil Gaiman, but they were both working for Vertigo when that line was written. It makes you wonder. That's all.
Yeah, it does.
Especially since we know that some of these British comic book creators don't actually like each other.
Yeah, the war in Albion. Yeah.
My biggest problem with Alan Moore is, dude, you're an anarchist and you're hung up on auctorial intent and don't understand close reading of text. You're an anarchist, dude. An anarchist should understand the close reading of text and how it can and how the work can actually undermine auctorial intent.
Mm-hmm.
Are you an egotist and not an anarchist?
I mean, the story could have been about him. It wasn't his. He had a werewolf story or something that's basically about periods. If I'm remembering.
Well, I mean, he wrote. I mean, but the what we're supposed to believe about Alan Moore's work like that is that he and his wife really are so in touch with each other and are such spiritually and emotionally mature anarchists that when he writes about women's stuff, he's channeling his wife.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I think he wrote The Lost Girls because he just likes girl sex.
Yeah, yeah.
And his wife was willing to go along with it for her own feminist reasons.
Right. I mean, that's possible, right? I want to believe the best about them, but
I want to believe the best of Alan Moore too. But I've always found it interesting that an anarchist is so hung up on auctorial intent, and that he's so angry about how other people read his stories.
That's very funny.
and how other people adapt his stories.
Yeah.
Though I also have to say that if you ever want to be able to insult not just Matthew Iglesias, but his own family, his whole family, it's worth noting that Matt Iglesias' father is the screenwriter who took all of the actual Alan Moore content out of From Hell.
Really?
Matt Iglesias' father is the screenwriter of From Hell with Johnny Depp.
Holy shit. I had no idea. No wonder Matty Iglesias has such bad takes.
That's not the movie. That's not the movie his father is most famous for. His father is most famous for a book and movie called Alive. He wrote the book. The book was really successful, and it was made into a somewhat successful movie that started him off onto a Hollywood career that included being the screenwriter for From Hell. But the fact that he's the guy who took all of the political content out of From Hell
Tells
is worth knowing.
Yeah.
And the grandfather, the father's father, was a Spanish socialist who lived in Cuba for a while, moved to the United States, became a writer for the Daily Worker, was an active communist who abruptly quit the Daily Worker and renounced communism to become a corporate executive, and then went on to write for The Nation and write anti-Castro novels.
Wow.
Matt Iglesias' grandmother, who was also a former communist who quit when her husband went corporate, was the founding literary editor of The Nation.
I had no idea.
So Matt Iglesias is yet another Cold War social democrat legacy turned neoconservative.
Yeah. Wow. Too many of them, I'd say.
You learn so much about people just by researching what's publicly available on the internet.
Yeah.
All of the serious, quote unquote, groundbreaking journalism I have ever done has just been scraping data from publicly available sites and writing Twitter threads about it.
Yeah. Powerful stuff.
But it's just, and it was for that sort of thing that no less a figure than Jimmy Dore groupie Johnny Graz once called me my favorite journalist on the internet. I'm not that much of a journalist. I'm just scraping publicly available data about who funds these groups and magazines from their own websites and following where that data goes to other websites.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can even do that with the new internet the way you could do that with the old internet. I know it's a lot harder to find links telling the truth about Steve Jobs and Mike Bloomberg and Bill Gates than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to rely on sites like Jacobin, which, have their purpose, but are deeply, deeply flawed sometimes.
No. One of my former associates in the boxing writing media, asked me, "Have you ever wrote for like Jacobin or The Nation?" Because I used to write for The Ring, which he used to write for, and I said, "No, because for various reasons, I don't know how comfortable I would be writing stuff that I think they would publish, and I don't know how comfortable they would be publishing the stuff I would prefer to write."
Yeah, exactly.
And he got it when I said that.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. I do have to say it was wonderfully reassuring to discover that my associates from the world of boxing writing had actually decent politics when I rediscovered them on Twitter.
Yeah. You're not talking about Matthew Hunter, are you?
No, well, Matthew Hunter's not too bad either, but I'm mostly talking about Nigel Collins, who was the editor-in-chief for The Ring and my first print editor when I wrote for The Ring.
Yeah.
And Bill Detloff, who was a contributing editor to The Ring and who was the guy who said, "Hey, you should write for The Ring." And so I did. And ended up with a column about women's boxing that I both feel guilty for having written about as a white dude and feel very proud of for having been someone to really be able to platform women's boxing in what was the most mainstream media for boxing at the time. So I have conflicted feelings about it. I liked it. I have still do have strong feelings about women's sports to this day because I understand the history and context of women's athletes and their fight to compete better than these bigots who say they don't want some women to compete because they don't like the kind of women they are.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, women's sports exists because women tried to compete against men and were told they couldn't.
Yeah.
And people who understand that history and that historical context of women's sports understand how disgusting it is for people to claim they're trying to protect women by keeping trans women out of women's sports.
Yeah, because they've segregated women into these spaces in the first place.
Layla McCarter, great women's boxer, wasn't ever allowed to do this because of how society works. What would have been my last column for The Ring and ended up going on my blog instead because of the corporate changes at The Ring. Layla McCarter told me, I want to fight a man. Straight up, I want to fight a man. I think there's no reason whatsoever. You find someone in the right weight class who matches up well physically with me. There's no reason women and men shouldn't fight. This is the boxer telling me this.
Yeah.
This isn't some political activist telling me women should fight men in some sort of ivory tower abstract. This is a professional boxer telling me she wants to fight a man because she thinks that is the best thing that could happen for both men's boxing and women's boxing.
Just wants to throw hands.
Yep. And I hear people now, after having this, having this conversation with Layla McCarter, I get so disgusted. And shout out to Mark Jones. Mark Jones is a friend I met on boxing Twitter who ended up following me to political Twitter, and I love him. Hey, Mark, thanks for watching today. I appreciate it. But yeah, Layla McCarter wanted to fight a man. And having had conversations with women athletes who talk about wanting to compete against men, and then seeing Martina Navratilova, who was transvestigated herself.
Yeah.
Let's not forget. Just to add an extra grotesquerie to all of this. She was transvestigated herself. Saying that women need to be protected from trans women because women are weaker than men.
That's so gross.
That is such a betrayal.
It is.
Of women's sports and other women athletes. And I think that, I really wonder if Layla McCarter would be interested in a boxing exhibition against Martina Navratilova.
Yeah.
I would love to find out, and would love to find out if Martina would be willing to participate.
Yeah, I think that I'd
because
like to
I think Layla would be interested in beating up Martina.
It sounds like she might be.
Now this is a good point. She sparred with Floyd Mayweather and was very, very good technically. Mark isn't wrong. So, I mean, she did have the right style to fight bigger and potentially, quote unquote, physically superior specimens.
Sure.
Though she never once said that she believed men were physically superior to her, I will note.
Yeah.
I've never spoken to an active female athlete who thinks men are superior to her.
Yeah. Why would they?
Not anybody actually competing.
Right.
You notice that the closest thing to an active athlete that the anti-trans movement can find is a swimmer who lost to 4 straight women and tied with a trans woman. Now let's be really clear here. lost to 4 cis women, tied with a trans woman, is angry at the trans woman she tied for 5th place with,
Right.
and not the 4 cis women who beat her.
Yeah, it's very clear that she's just doing the outraged fundraising.
And what's more, let's be honest about this. Her whole personal history undermines the argument that no cis women can ever compete fairly against trans women. The trans woman came in tied for 5th place.
Yeah.
The 4 people who came in first, the gold, silver, bronze, and unlucky 4th, were all cis women.
Mm-hmm.
Let's remember that.
That's crazy.
Now, we wandered far from the topic
of the Justice League,
but all of this feeds back into the final thing that, you know, a comic book that was supposed to be realistic deconstructed all of the humanity out as superheroes to where it becomes something less artistically useful than Cheers, but with co-workers in costume.
Yeah. And you have to ask yourself too, if this is what it means for superheroes to be human, what does that say about your opinion of what it makes humans to be human?
Exactly. What does that say about your view of humanity? Humanism versus misanthropy. I mean, because ultimately, regardless of someone's personal political denomination, I agree with Murray Bookchin's basic fundamental statement that what we are really doing is trying to ignite a war between misanthropes and humanists. And we want the humanists to win.
Yeah, absolutely. We want the humanists to win. And the humanists are not the ones writing that Justice League book.
They're not the ones writing bad Justice League books. They're not the ones writing bad realistic takes on the Avengers in the context of the War on Terror. They're not the ones, and I'm going to go out and attack a very specific movie, they are not the ones who decide that Prince Namor invades Wakanda instead of New York City.
Yeah.
And honestly, and I want to make what I think is a more intelligent argument about changing the personal histories of characters, is that who a character is, in a comic book sense, has a lot to do with what a person does. Namor, the Submariner, is the son of an American sailor and a native woman, native princess, if you like, to really go with the trope. He is the son of a white American sailor and a blue Atlantean princess who decides to side with his blue family instead of his white family.
Yeah, I mean, that's problematic.
No, I mean, it's problematic in the sense that he's a race traitor who's betrayed America to join Atlantis.
Yeah.
It's not problematic in the sense that, hey, this guy's actually taking a stand for his oppressed family against his oppressor family.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, though. Yeah. But I mean, so making Namor a Maya being manipulated by a bad guy who he's just a little too willing to trust for no really good reason doesn't make the same sense as a guy who's pissed at his white family because they're killing his blue family.
Yeah, no, totally.
And the thing that really makes Golden Age Namor and Silver Age Namor work so well in the political context of their time is he's a white guy who's standing up for his blue relatives against the other white guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes back to the classic line that Denny O'Neil puts in the mouth of the black guy in that first Green Lantern Green Arrow issue.
Yeah.
I've seen you stand up for the blue people and the green people and the pink people, but what you done for the black people?
Yeah.
And you get this, and it is clear that the blue submariners of the Golden Age book and the blue Atlanteans of the Silver Age book are very clearly the people being harmed by American imperialism in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, because this is when the Pacific Theater would have been wide open.
And Bill Everett, the man who created the Submariner, was telling a story about an anti-hero waging war against the U.S. Navy. And the first superhero crossover was the Human Torch, Marvel's other big selling comic book character, stopping Namor's invasion of New York. And the Human Torch and Namor realizing that though the U.S. government is bad, Namor doesn't need to personally hate Americans because Americans are kind of getting shat on by the government too.
Yeah, it's very pro-working class.
And of course, let's remember that the Human Torch himself is a robot and not a person, and is sort of the ultimate workers' rights statement in that he becomes sentient and takes on a heroic life of his own beyond simply being programmed to be an android simulacrum of a person.
Right.
And so you have this fight between this robot who isn't a human, but is trying to learn to be human and protect humans, and this rebel who is trying to protect one section of humanity from another section of humanity. And by their fight with each other, they are exploring their own conflicts and coming to understand them. And, nobody thinks of the Golden Age comic books as being this sophisticated.
No, they really don't. And there's so much. Once you temper your mindset to these books, they're really rewarding. They're really rewarding.
My perfect, if I had the power to make the Marvel movie canon in my own image, the first movie is Namor the Submariner, and Captain America is the quote-unquote bad guy. Now, obviously, the movie ends with them making nice, because Captain America and Namor did make nice. Right. And Captain America was the one who convinced, look, yeah, I know America's not perfect and we can be better, and people like me want to make America better. Have you seen these Nazi guys?
Yeah.
And Captain America introducing Namor to the reality of the Nazis and what the Nazis were doing to other surface people causes Namor to embrace this larger humanist mission to defend the entire world from Nazism, even his enemies in America. So this is a popular front metaphor, too.
Right. I think that's way better than what we got.
But that's my perfect first Marvel movie canon. Namor the Submariner, with lots of fights between Captain America and Namor, and them making nice at the end because Nazis are worse.
Yeah.
And that should be how, and that's my whole storyline is how conflict brings the collective together against the real enemies out there.
Yeah. What is it Harry Haywood said? We are one through struggle.
Yes. And so then my first Fantastic Four movie would be essentially worked in such a way that it's a direct sequel to a first Hulk movie. The first Hulk movie is your classic Hulk against the military story, because Jack Kirby and Stan Lee did so many great anti-war stories in that Hulk book. During the Cold War, no less, where the Hulk is actually fighting troops that work for the Strategic Air Command. So the Hulk is actually at war with our nuclear forces.
Can you hear what's going on outside? I hope my mic's not. Sorry.
And if it's distracting, we can wrap shortly. I want to anyway.
Yeah, I need to get going soon.
Yeah, but
besides,
no,
I apologize for whatever's happening outside.
anything in the background is being filtered out pretty well, even if it is distracting you. It shouldn't distract anybody listening to us.
Somebody's, I guess, spraying water on some sort of corrugated sheet metal is what it sounds like.
So the Hulk movie is just the Hulk fighting the military and running out into the desert, basically. And I think you can make a good movie about that. Just look at any Godzilla movie. Hulk as kaiju.
Absolutely.
And then the sequel is the Fantastic Four coming back to Earth. Obviously, you put the more of the origin story in flashbacks, but the sequel is the Fantastic Four coming back to Earth and having to save and having to beat the Hulk to help Bruce Banner, and then temporarily curing Bruce Banner,
right?
And thus setting up the next Fantastic Four movie, which was also a sequel to a Hulk movie. You throw a classic Hulk Tyrannus movie in there, and that sets up the absolute blockbuster that Marvel is going to shoot themselves for having made impossible. Hulk, Fantastic Four, War in Subterranea. You know how many political metaphors you can go with a war between the Mole Man and Tyrannus in Subterranea?
I mean, Jerry Ordway almost did one like that in his Hulk. When he was, taking over between John Byrne and.
No, there is a great Subterranea Hulk storyline where the Mole Man, where Tyrannus makes this deal with these other flunkies with these other people in Subterranea to form in this evil group to take over the living flame, which is this powerful artifact. And the Mole Man is involved in trying to stop them, and it ends up at war with Tyrannus, and the Hulk has to deal with the war and defeat the bad guys.
Well, in Jerry Ordway's stories, the Moloids actually legitimately unionize again.
Yes.
They use the word. We get our strength through our union.
The Moloids overthrow the Mole Man and
Tyrannus.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really funny.
I love it. The Moloids want their rights from the Mole Man.
That's right.
That's awesome too. Though I always liked the idea that the Mole Man was probably kind of a good ruler to the Moloids. His problem was with people.
Yeah.
People on the surface. He probably got along really well with the Moloids, and their actual system was probably more like Soviet democracy than dictatorship.
Right. The Moloid workers' councils.
The Moloid workers' councils had to elect the advisors to the Mole Man, and the Mole Man had to listen to his advisors, or they might remove him.
Yeah, sorry, I got to bring this to the district committee.
We cannot decide whether to hold the Fantastic Four prisoner or let them return to the surface until we let the workers' councils vote.
Yeah. Oh, we gotta send this one up the flagpole real quick.
The Mole Man got a bad rep. He's not really Hitler. He's the real Stalin as opposed to the character of Stalin. Not to say that the real Stalin was perfect.
No, nobody.
He had different flaws than the caricature.
Yeah, for sure. But I love the idea of the Mole Man practicing democratic centralism.
Isn't that? I mean, but that's and I think that's one of the two situations where you can really picture it. The other place you can really picture it is, despite everything, Dr. Doom is a benevolent despot.
Yeah, socialism in one country.
You can see that while Dr. Doom follows his personal whims on all matters of foreign policy, you can also imagine that domestic policy is completely controlled by the workers' council.
That's why my bio says Latveria state-controlled media.
Now, Latveria obviously is a monarchy, so it can't truly be socialist. But let us remember that the fake socialist People's Republic of Kampuchea was created by a partnership between the putatively communist Khmer Rouge and the former king.
Right. Well,
and then Prince Sihanouk was the only person who believed that the Khmer Rouge should be a fully functioning, good faith member of the post-genocide political order.
Wow.
He insisted on it. I mean, it's just so hilarious the way that ultimately the guy who was loyal to the Khmer Rouge was the king.
That's so funny. What a mess of contradictions.
That's how you know. That's how you know the people talking about how Khmer Rouge was a CIA front were right, though, because their closest ally was the king.
Yeah.
What real communists aren't killing the king?
Yeah. Right. Right. Regicide. Day one.
I mean, that was the
Action
first
item
thing.
number one.
I mean, that was like the first thing the Bolsheviks did after their revolution: get rid of the royals so they couldn't come back. And I mean, I hate to say it because I understand why people get all squishy about, you know, the killing off of quote unquote innocent women and children.
Yeah.
I'm not super comfortable with some of that stuff either, but from a practical question, the absolute worst thing you can have if you're actually trying to replace a monarchy with a republic is leftover claimants to the throne.
Yeah.
Look at what happened in France because they left a few people alive.
They got a new emperor.
Well, what? No, more than that. When the emperor fell, they got the king's brother back, and he was pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And his brother was worse.
That's crazy.
And the one member of the royal family, they didn't even leave the right member of the royal family alive. They cut off the head of Citizen Egalite because he lost a battle. Which is also hilarious, is there was a member of the royal family who supported the revolution so much that he changed his name to Citizen Egalite and gave up any sort of family connection to the royals of his own free will. And the revolution chopped off his head and made an enemy of his son.
Man, that's crazy.
Because King Louis Philippe was the son of Citizen Egalite.
Wow.
And every possible bad thing that Louis Philippe did as king, when he went away, and this whole image of him as the bourgeois king who sided with the capitalist class against everyone else, this all comes from his experiences with the bourgeois period of the French Revolution being good, but the more radical folks chopped his dad's head off.
Wow.
And so this probably had an effect on him as king. I just find it interesting though, because it's like he actually named himself Citizen Egalite.
Yeah.
And joined the Revolutionary Army and gave up any sort of claims to royalty whatsoever.
That's his new secret identity.
And they chopped off his head. But how's that for a real life superhero? Citizen Egalite.
I know. It's almost too corny to be real, but like,
and yet it was. He literally changed his name to Citizen Egalite.
I mean, that's the exact opposite of Baron Bedlam.
Yes. Well, Baron Bedlam really was Baron Frederick de Lamb. And so his name was really in there. Frederick de Lamb, Baron de Lamb, Baron Bedlam.
I love comic books. I think that's where I'm going to have to leave this episode.
And that's because tell people where they can support you and where they can listen to your content.
Okay, so my podcast is called Collective Action Comics. It is a Marxist theory and history podcast using comic books as historical documents. The first season that we ostensibly came, but just had too much fun talking about other things to talk about today, was the first season was Justice League International, which is the beginning of the global counter-revolution, the rise of Reagan republicanism. The second season is Mark Miller and Brian Hitch's The Ultimates, which is the revamp of the Avengers right in that very, very wild political time after 9/11, but just before we'd invaded Iraq, when everybody was losing their minds.
Basically, picture the Avengers working for George W. Bush, and you're not too far wrong.
Yeah, and it's very it's clearly supposed to be a satire, and it ends up lionizing these characters and falling completely on his face. And then the third season I'm working on right now, I'm in the middle of, is the Death and Return of Superman. I'm very, very proud of this. I'm proud of my other seasons, but this one I'm putting some extra juice into.
You should be really proud of all of them, but yeah, the death and return of Superman is good work too.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. It's chronicling the Clinton administration that the conservativeness of the Clinton administration that Reagan paved the way for, and how the Death and Return of Superman is a love letter to a future that will never come to be by
we need to do future episodes on those 2 seasons too, because every one of those seasons is a show in itself and very much worthy of promoting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and you can find it anywhere anywhere fine podcasts are sold. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any podcast app you want.
I found it very easily with a quick search on my iPhone in Apple Podcasts, and was able to listen to the first season really quickly and get into it right away, and I loved it.
Yeah, and each season is getting longer and longer. But that's the nature.
Well, my only complaint about the first season was this is too short. I want more content.
Yeah. I was pretty daunted by that 2-hour finale, but that's nothing compared to what I'm doing now.
Well, I mean, look at me. I mean, hey, I'm the guy who does a live show for 3.5 hours. So I do my show based on, well, what would I want to listen to if I were watching TV on Sunday morning and didn't want to turn on Meet the Press? So I try to give people a show like Meet the Press in that it's a conversational format, but with conversations that people might actually relate to or care about or find interesting.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that whenever people give me, nice feedback about the show, one of the things that I really appreciate hearing is, because my show is rather vicious sometimes about these comic books. I love hearing people say that they can tell how much I deeply love superhero comics, even as I'm tearing these particular ones apart. I wouldn't do this if I didn't love it.
The reason that people hate comics like the Ultimates or Justice League International, or what's another good example? Or the rightfully praised and rightfully criticized magnum opus of Howard Chaykin, American Flag.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much, the reason that people hate these books is because of how much they love comic books, and they think that these books are bad for comics and so.
Yeah, not just bad comics, bad for comics.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think of the same thing about The Death of Superman, which has been an interesting experience for me.
The Death of Superman, despite in sometimes not being great comics and having bad politics, was really good for comics.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it was very good for comics. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because I'm working on the whole blaming it for the comics bubble being burst. It's not, I mean, it's partially true, but it's not entirely the fault of Superman, and it's certainly not the fault of the Superman writers.
The biggest people to blame for the comic bubble bursting, honestly, are the people who made the comic bubble happen, the Image Boys,
and Marvel, and Marvel with Ron Perlman,
and Marvel to a certain degree too. I won't deny that, but the people who are the big people to blame for the bubble bursting are, Marvel too, definitely. But the Image Boys for not being able to come together and be true to themselves and actually make Image work.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, Image became 5 different companies, which we don't talk about enough now. The Image that's there now is just Eric Larson's company. And all of the things that went into the making of the original Image went with Todd and Rob and Jim in their separate directions. And, Eric just has, I'm going to help creators make books, which, that's a great thing. And we need to give that credit. But that was never I'm going to help creators make books was never going to maintain that capitalist comic book bubble.
No, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model.
If they had been able to get some sort of schemata for collective creator ownership instead of individualist creator ownership, then, Image as a comic book creator co-op could have been a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't happen. And I mean, one of the great contradictions that nothing is better for keeping capitalism going than successful anarcho-syndicalism in the market. When anarcho-syndicalism is better in capitalist markets, it makes capitalism and capitalist markets tolerable. Which may be a good argument against anarcho-syndicalism. I don't know. I guess it depends on what your ultimate ends are.
Yeah. And what you're using it for sure.
But imagine the potential success and power of an anarcho-syndicalist Image Comics as opposed to what we actually got because big egos couldn't coexist.
And I think with it's not. It's the biggest point to take away is obviously that the egos clashed, but
Exactly.
also none of these people went in with any particular political motivation, nor
No.
any political theory or grounding.
They
And I
didn't
wouldn't
even
expect
really
them
have a
to.
theory of what they were trying to
Yeah,
change about the comic book industry
yeah,
other than creator rights good for us, we're creators.
yeah. And I agree.
And only Eric Larson really kept that ethic consistent. Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane had a series of disputes with creators they hired over ownership of characters.
Which is very hypocritical.
What
Obviously.
is worse than Warren Ellis's authority being a DC Comics universe, being a DC Universe property?
Right. Speaking of problematic creators.
And I've always been disappointed to Warren Ellis for not living up to his promise to be the next Alan Moore with all of Alan Moore's flaws. But ultimately, Warren Ellis is the guy whose first great book about a possible future socialist movement threw trans people under the bus.
Was that Transmetropolitan?
Transmetropolitan.
Yeah.
The aliens playing with their own DNA in Transmetropolitan are so obviously a metaphor for trans people, right down to the point where Spider Jerusalem even says, these people are a sick joke, but I have to stand up for them, which is sort of the same attitude many liberals had about trans rights at the time. I don't like trans people, but I'm going to stand up for their rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, that would be so much better than I like trans people, but I'm going to sell them out to Nazis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, on that note, for my wrap up, obviously you can watch us on YouTube at Eclectic Radical. If you have watched this whole thing from start to finish, or even just for the last hour to make it to the end, hit like and subscribe. It'll really, really help. Check out the Patreon. All the old shows go up on the Patreon the same week they run, so you can catch up on stuff there. If you want to get these in your mailbox so you can watch them pausing when you need to or listen to them while you're at work instead of watching them live, follow us on Substack. I email this out and upload it to Spotify the day of or day after every week too. And it's always Eclectic Radical everywhere. If you want to subscribe on Patreon, subscribe on Substack, follow on YouTube, just give me money on PayPal. It's Eclectic Radical everywhere. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Nat, for another great and wide-ranging conversation.
Thank you for having me on, Chris.
I tried to monopolize the conversation less this time.
No, you're always a pleasure to talk to.
And everybody else, you guys have a great week, and we'll tweet at you.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, everybody.